Beneath the surface of the familiar world lies a history so vast, so deeply buried, that it almost defies imagination. For centuries, humanity has believed itself to be the first great civilization, a pinnacle of progress on a once wild planet. But what if that belief is incomplete? What if traces of an earlier world still sleep beneath our feet, waiting for the patient hands of time and curiosity to brush away the dust? It begins, as many great questions do, in silence. A silence that stretches back tens of thousands of years. The official story of humanity is surprisingly brief. Civilization, we are told, began only about 6,000 years ago, with the first city-states of Sumer and the river cultures of Egypt and the Indus Valley. Before that, there were hunters and gatherers, scattered, primitive, struggling merely to survive. Yet the ground beneath those cities holds whispers that are older, deeper, and far more complex. Every excavation, every stray artifact found in an impossible layer, seems to hint that something else once thrived here, something forgotten. The earth, in her patience, remembers everything. Beneath deserts, jungles, and oceans, she hides the remnants of ages long past. Layers of sediment preserve the rise and fall of climates, the sudden vanishing of species, the scars of meteor impacts, and the soot of ancient fires. To a trained geologist, the crust of our planet reads like a library written in stone, and somewhere among its shelves may rest the faintest traces of a civilization erased not by war or disease, but by time itself. Historians are still debating whether such a civilization could truly have existed. Mainstream archaeology insists that complex urban life emerged abruptly in the Neolithic period, driven by the mastery of agriculture. Yet there are outliers that resist this tidy chronology, sites like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, which seem to belong to an entirely different chapter of human development. How, after all, could people without agriculture or metal tools carve pillars weighing tens of tons and arrange them in astronomical precision? Such discoveries unsettle the comfortable notion that civilization is a linear ascent. Every now and then, a clue surfaces that feels almost like a whisper from a forgotten teacher. The Antikythera mechanism, discovered in a Greek shipwreck, reveals a level of mechanical sophistication not thought possible until 1,000 years later. The Baghdad battery suggests that ancient peoples might have experimented with electricity long before modern science. Parts, out-of-place artifacts, challenge the tidy timelines of progress. Though skeptics dismiss many as hoaxes or misunderstandings, yet the pattern remains: flashes of brilliance scattered across the dark expanse of prehistory. The question lingers in scholarly circles: could another intelligent species, or an earlier human civilization, have reached technological or architectural heights only to vanish without trace? The answer, unsettling as it may be, is that it's possible, at least geologically speaking. Earth's surface renews itself constantly. Oceans swallow coastlines, glaciers grind continents flat, and volcanic eruptions bury entire worlds in ash. In as little as 10,000 years, even our modern cities would fade, reduced to faint shadows detectable only by subtle chemical signatures in the soil. If such a predecessor civilization existed, whether human or something else, evidence would be extraordinarily difficult to find. Ancient river deltas, now submerged, could conceal entire settlements. Desert sands might have entombed their ruins beneath miles of shifting dunes. Even the pressure of tectonic plates could have recycled their very stones into new crust. The persistence of memory, it seems, is fragile when measured against the patience of the planet. But memory endures in another form: story. Across the world, cultures separated by oceans and epochs tell remarkably similar myths. Tales of golden ages lost to flood and fire. The Maya spoke of successive worlds destroyed by cataclysms. The Sumerians wrote of a flood that cleansed the earth. Aboriginal Australians preserved oral histories of sea level rise dating back to the last ice age. Historians still debate whether these are symbolic expressions or faint recollections of real events that once reshaped the human world. Modern science adds its own quiet intrigue. Ice cores from Greenland reveal sudden spikes of dust and soot around 12 to 800 years ago, consistent with massive wildfires. At the same moment, global temperatures plunged, a period known as the Younger Dryas. Some researchers propose that a comet impact triggered the chaos, annihilating megafauna and scattering early cultures. Others argue for volcanic activity or oceanic disruption. Whatever the cause, the world changed overnight. If there had been any advanced culture then, coastal, maritime, or otherwise, its cities would now lie deep beneath the sea. And there, perhaps, lies the true mystery. Not proof, but possibility. Archaeologists have barely begun to map the ocean floor. Less than 10% of it has been thoroughly surveyed. Yet sonar scans occasionally reveal puzzling geometric shapes, linear ridges, and terraces at depths where no known civilization should exist. Most turn out to be natural formations. A few remain unexplained. The temptation to connect them to myth is strong, though the evidence is faint. Still, even the faintest evidence may one day illuminate a vast forgotten chapter. The hypothesis that humanity might not be the first great civilization is not new. In the 19th century, Charles Lyell and later Charles Darwin introduced the notion of deep time, the staggering realization that Earth's history spans billions of years. Against such immensity, the rise and fall of species becomes a rhythm, not an exception. Civilizations could have come and gone long before the pyramids were even dreams in the desert sand. The Silurian hypothesis, proposed by modern scientists, asks this question seriously. If an industrial civilization had arisen millions of years ago, would we even notice today? Yet, this theory is not meant to replace history, but to expand its horizon. It invites humility, the recognition that human achievement, magnificent as it seems, may not be unique. Each monument we build, each technology we invent, might be an echo rather than a beginning. The possibility itself changes the way we read the past. Every ruin becomes a palimpsest, every stone a page rewritten over and over by civilizations we can barely imagine. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you really like what I'm doing here. And if you're still awake, share where you're listening from, your location, and the local time. Somewhere, perhaps across another ocean or another era, someone once did the same, reaching out across the darkness, hoping that their story too would survive. The Earth has always been a restless storyteller. Its landscapes shift, mountains rise, oceans swallow continents, and what once was a thriving plain becomes a seabed buried beneath miles of sediment. To study this restless motion is to realize that civilization, as humanity defines it, exists only by grace of stability. Yet geological history shows that stability is a temporary illusion. The continents themselves have wandered across the globe, breaking and reforming over hundreds of millions of years. In that deep context, the existence of our species is barely a blink. What if other blinks came before us? Civilizations erased not by war or decay, but by the planet's own periodic resets. Geologists call these resets catastrophic transitions. They mark boundaries between eras, moments when Earth's biosphere and climate were violently transformed. The Permian extinction, 252 million years ago, wiped out nearly all life in the seas and 3/4 on land. 66 million years ago, another cataclysm ended the age of the dinosaurs. But not all catastrophes are so ancient. The last ice age, ending roughly 11,100 years ago, reshaped coastlines, drowned fertile plains, and left behind myths of deluge across every surviving culture. If advanced societies existed before this melt, they would have been coastal, and therefore doomed as the seas rose 400 feet. Historians are still debating whether geological upheaval could entirely erase the traces of civilization. Some insist that signs of human industry, metals, plastics, isotopic residues, would persist for millions of years. Others counter that tectonic recycling, erosion, and biological decay would reduce even a modern metropolis to dust within 10 millennia. In that span, rivers shift course, forests reclaim concrete, and the record of our presence becomes faint chemical ghosts. The very forces that nurture life also conspire to hide its memory. The Earth's forgotten epochs invite imagination. Around 56 million years ago, during the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, global temperatures soared, the poles melted, and strange mammalian species emerged overnight in the fossil record. Scientists debate what triggered that warming: volcanic carbon release, methane burst from the seafloor, or perhaps something more unusual. The isotopic anomalies are strikingly similar to those humans are now producing. The Silurian hypothesis takes this observation seriously. If another intelligent species once burned carbon on an industrial scale, the only surviving evidence might be subtle chemical fingerprints in sedimentary rock. It is an eerie notion that the proof of past civilization might already be catalogued in scientific data, misinterpreted as natural phenomena. Even today, researchers occasionally stumble upon what appear to be artificial alignments or inexplicable engineering deep within the Earth. In South Africa, the Barberton Greenstone Belt preserves spherical metallic objects embedded in ancient rock. Some claim they are Klerksdorp spheres, the manufactured relics of a lost civilization billions of years old. Mainstream geology, of course, dismisses them as natural concretions formed by mineral crystallization under pressure. Yet the fascination persists, because they symbolize the tension between belief and evidence that defines all inquiries into the deep past. New discoveries continually blur the edges of accepted history. Off the coast of Cuba, in 2001, sonar surveys detected vast geometric structures on the ocean floor, pyramidal shapes arranged with unnatural symmetry at depths exceeding 600 meters. The findings remain controversial. Some suggest they are natural formations distorted by sonar imaging, while others quietly wonder whether they might represent the submerged remains of an Ice Age city. Oceanic exploration is still limited, and what little is known suggests that humanity's prehistory may be vastly incomplete. There are patterns that recur throughout time, as though civilization itself obeys a geological rhythm. The lost glacial maximum confined humanity to scattered refuges, yet almost as soon as the ice retreated, monumental architecture appeared, from Anatolia to South America. Was this coincidence, or a resurgence? Could survivors of an older culture have passed fragments of knowledge to hunter-gatherers rebuilding after catastrophe? Archaeologists hesitate to speculate, but myths from every continent tell of culture bringers, luminous figures who emerged after the flood to teach writing, agriculture, and astronomy. In Mesopotamia, the figure was Oannes, a being half man and half fish who rose from the sea to educate early humanity. In Mesoamerica, it was Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent who brought maize and measurement. In Egypt, Thoth, the ibis-headed scribe of the gods, taught language and mathematics. Historians are still debating whether these stories merely symbolize the dawn of human ingenuity, or if they preserve dim memories of teachers from a vanished epoch, survivors carrying the embers of an earlier fire. Earth's shifting face provides a plausible stage for such amnesia. As glaciers expanded and retreated, entire river systems vanished. The Sahara, now an ocean of sand, once hosted green savannas and lakes large enough to sustain vast populations. Satellite imaging has revealed buried channels, ancient settlements, and even possible harbor remains beneath dunes. If a civilization had flourished there during a wetter age, its remnants would now lie under hundreds of feet of desert, invisible to casual exploration. Volcanic disasters add another layer to the story. The eruption of Thera around 1600 BCE devastated the Minoan civilization, erasing a sophisticated maritime culture in a matter of days. If an even larger eruption occurred in prehistory, one unrecorded but immense, it could have obliterated an entire species of civilization. The Toba supervolcano, which erupted about 74,000 years ago, ejected enough ash to plunge the planet into a volcanic winter. Genetic studies suggest humanity nearly vanished then, reduced to a few thousand individuals. Some geneticists propose that this bottleneck explains why all modern humans are so closely related, but others wonder if it also marks the end of an unknown chapter, a prior culture lost to the ashen silence. A strange hypothesis arises from these converging clues. Suppose civilization is not a singular event, but a recurring process. Suppose intelligence is an ecological inevitability, a phenomenon that re-emerges whenever the planet stabilizes long enough to nurture complexity. In that case, Earth might have hosted not one human epoch, but several, each destroyed by flood, fire, or freeze, leaving only the faintest sedimentary signature behind. The implications are unsettling yet oddly poetic. Every age would believe itself unique, unaware that it walks the same fragile path as those before it. Each would rise, build, innovate, and finally dissolve back into dust, leaving behind just enough enigma to haunt the next. The cyclical nature of Earth's geology mirrors this pattern. Continents collide, mountains crumble, oceans shift. Even the magnetic poles wander and flip, erasing celestial maps and confusing ancient navigators. If such cycles have happened before, the traces of earlier intelligence may lie hidden in the very fabric of the world, locked within isotopes, trapped beneath polar ice, or disguised as myth. Each fragment we uncover, from mysterious ruins to inexplicable artifacts, may not be isolated anomalies but pieces of a far older mosaic. Perhaps one day, when the archaeologists of the distant future sift through the ruins of our own cities, they too will ask whether humanity was truly the first, or merely the latest refrain in Earth's long, recurring song. High in the arid hills of southeastern Turkey lies a place that changed everything historians thought they knew about civilization's dawn. It is called Göbekli Tepe, the Potbelly Hill. For thousands of years, it slumbered beneath the soil, hidden from human memory. Then, in the mid-1990s, a team of archaeologists began to uncover its buried circles of stone. What they found defied every assumption about prehistory. The site, radiocarbon dated to around 9600 BCE, is at least 11,500 years old, older than any known city, temple, or written word. Yet it is not primitive. Vast T-shaped pillars, some weighing up to 20 tons, rise from carefully arranged enclosures. Many are carved with reliefs of animals, foxes, lions, vultures, serpents, rendered with stunning skill. The pillars stand in symmetrical circles, precisely aligned and evidently planned. Whoever built this place understood geometry, astronomy, and symbolism far beyond what hunter-gatherers were thought capable of. Historians are still debating whether Göbekli Tepe represents the earliest known temple complex or something even more enigmatic, the ceremonial heart of a forgotten culture. The carvings suggest ritual significance, perhaps linked to constellations or seasonal cycles. Some researchers propose that it was a meeting point for tribes, a place where myth and measurement converged. Yet others see something deeper, the echo of a civilization that had already achieved monumental artistry long before the rise of agriculture. The paradox of Göbekli Tepe is simple yet haunting. According to the established timeline, agriculture came first, leading to permanent settlements, then to religion, writing, and architecture. But here, the sequence appears reversed. Monumental architecture came first. Then, centuries later, agriculture followed. This reversal suggests that complex social organization, advanced planning, and perhaps even scientific understanding existed before humanity domesticated plants and animals. Archaeologist Klaus Schmidt, who led the excavation until his death, described the site as a cathedral on a hill, built by hunter-gatherers at the end of the Ice Age. He believed it was a sanctuary dedicated to the dead, its carvings depicting the transition between life and death. Yet the precision of the stonework, the repetition of architectural motifs, and the deliberate burial of the site around 8000 BCE imply a sophistication that remains unexplained. Why would prehistoric people build something so grand and then intentionally cover it up? Some have speculated that Göbekli Tepe might not have been the beginning of civilization, but the final echo of an older one, a remnant culture, perhaps, left over from a more advanced society destroyed by the climate chaos of the Younger Dryas. The deliberate burial could have been an act of preservation, a symbolic closing of an age. Skeptics caution against such speculation, pointing out that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Still, the site refuses to conform neatly to the accepted story of progress. It is not alone in its mystery. Less than 500 kilometers away, the ruins of Nevelachori and Karahan Tepe reveal similar pillars, carvings, and architectural features, suggesting a network of contemporaneous sites across the Fertile Crescent. This entire region, long assumed to be the birthplace of agriculture, now appears to have hosted a sophisticated cultural horizon at the very dawn of civilization. Could these settlements represent the fading frontier of an earlier knowledge, one that survived just long enough to seed the Neolithic Revolution? The artistic motifs of Göbekli Tepe deepen the enigma. The animals depicted correspond strikingly with constellations visible in the sky during that era. One particular panel, showing a vulture holding a sphere and a scorpion nearby, has been interpreted by some archaeoastronomers as a record of a catastrophic celestial event, perhaps a comet impact. This theory connects the site to the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, which proposes that a swarm of comet fragments struck Earth around 12,800 years ago, triggering global fires and floods. If true, the builders of Göbekli Tepe may have been commemorating or warning of a disaster they had witnessed. The pillars themselves may once have supported roofs or wooden structures, now long vanished. Excavations continue to reveal deeper layers, older still, buried intentionally beneath newer constructions. This sequential pattern, building, burying, rebuilding, suggests that the site evolved over centuries, preserving a memory across generations. The precision of its circular design implies an understanding of the cosmos, possibly aligned with solstices or star risings, much like later megalithic monuments such as Stonehenge. Yet Göbekli Tepe predates them by over 6 millennia. Some fringe researchers have connected Göbekli Tepe to myths of a first time, an age when gods or sky beings taught early humanity the arts of civilization. The Sumerians called this era the Antediluvian Age, ruled by semi-divine kings who reigned for thousands of years before the Great Flood. While mainstream historians treat these accounts as myth, the temporal proximity of Göbekli Tepe to those legendary epochs invites speculation. Was this hilltop sanctuary a bridge between myth and history, a place where memory survived in stone long after the teachers were gone? The craftsmanship at Göbekli Tepe also raises questions about technology. The builders had no metal tools, no wheels, and no domesticated animals. Yet they quarried, shaped, and transported massive limestone blocks with perfect balance and symmetry. Experimental archaeology has shown that such feats are possible using simple stone tools and human labor, but the scale remains astonishing. More puzzling is the absence of everyday artifacts. No signs of habitation, cooking, or farming nearby. The site appears purely ceremonial, as if those who built it gathered for specific rituals and then departed. The very existence of such a sacred complex implies an advanced symbolic consciousness, an awareness of mortality, the cosmos, and abstract order. To create a structure aligned with stars requires not just observation, but continuity. Generations parsing down knowledge, maintaining a shared cosmology. That continuity itself is evidence of cultural depth, the kind that normally develops within stable, organized societies. Göbekli Tepe seems to belong to a world where people were already capable of long-term planning, coordination, and reverence for cycles larger than themselves. When the site was finally abandoned and buried, humanity stood at the edge of transformation. Within a few thousand years, cities would rise in Sumer, Egypt, and the Indus Valley. Agriculture would spread, writing would emerge, and religion would crystallize. Some scholars now suspect that the ideas embodied at Göbekli Tepe, the sanctification of space, the observation of the heavens, the architecture of memory, were the seeds of all later civilization. In this light, Göbekli Tepe becomes not a singular anomaly, but a threshold. It marks the border between worlds, the last breath of the Hunter Age and the first whisper of the city. Whether it was built by survivors of an earlier culture or by visionary communities on the brink of invention, it proves that the human story began earlier and more mysteriously than we ever imagined. If there truly was a forgotten civilization, its spirit might still linger here, carved into these stones, encoded in the way the sunlight falls on their weathered faces. And if the builders meant for us to find it again one day, to remember who came before, then perhaps their plan has succeeded. For centuries, the legend of Atlantis has lingered like a mirage at the edge of recorded history, a story too grand to be dismissed, yet too elusive to be confirmed. It first appeared not in myth or oral tradition, but in philosophy. Around 360 BCE, the Greek thinker Plato described a magnificent island civilization that existed 9,000 years before his time, which would place it near the end of the last ice age. According to his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, Atlantis was a technologically advanced maritime power that ruled vast territories before being swallowed by the sea in a single day and night of misfortune. Most historians regard the tale as allegory, a moral lesson about hubris, not a historical account. Yet the precision of Plato's description invites curiosity. He spoke of a concentric city built on an island beyond the Pillars of Heracles, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar, surrounded by fertile plains, mountains rich in metals, and harbors filled with ships. Atlantis, he wrote, warred with the early Greeks before earthquakes and floods consigned it to the ocean depths. Whether Plato invented it or inherited the story from older Egyptian sources as he claimed, remains a matter of scholarly debate. The mystery endures because the timeline aligns uncannily with known geological upheavals. Around 11,600 years ago, the Earth experienced a sudden warming at the end of the Younger Dryas period, leading to massive glacial melt, rising sea levels, and widespread coastal flooding. Ice sheets that had covered North America and Northern Europe collapsed, releasing torrents of fresh water into the oceans. Entire continental shelves vanished beneath the waves. If a civilization had occupied those lowlands, it would have disappeared overnight, leaving only myth to mark its passing. Some researchers have proposed that Atlantis was not a single city, but a memory of multiple lost cultures, fragments of Ice Age coastal settlements submerged by the post-glacial flood. This interpretation suggests that the story's power lies in its symbolic truth. Humanity did lose something vast and luminous at the dawn of history. The fall of Atlantis might represent the collective trauma of rising seas, encoded in myth across continents. The Maya, Sumerians, and Hindus all preserved flood narratives with striking parallels. The destruction of advanced peoples, divine warnings, and survivors who carried the seeds of civilization to new lands. Modern explorers have sought the physical Atlantis everywhere. In the Azores, on the coast of Spain, under the Caribbean, even beneath Antarctica's ice. Each generation finds new candidates, fueled by new technology. In the mid-20th century, Sonar mapping revealed mysterious formations near Bimini in the Bahamas, long, straight blocks resembling pavement, dubbed the Bimini Road. Some claimed it was an ancient harbor wall. Later studies identified it as a natural limestone formation, though its geometric regularity still sparks debate. Elsewhere, ruins discovered beneath the waters off Cuba, Portugal, and the Canary Islands have stirred similar speculation. None have yielded definitive proof, yet none have silenced the allure. Historians are still debating whether Atlantis might have roots in real Bronze Age cultures. The eruption of Thera, modern Santorini, around 1600 BCE, destroyed the Minoan civilization, a sophisticated maritime society with palaces, plumbing, and intricate art. The event fits Plato's description in part, a prosperous island destroyed by volcanic fury. Some scholars believe his account may have been inspired by this catastrophe, amplified through centuries of retelling. But the chronological gap between the Minoans and Plato's supposed date for Atlantis remains enormous, nearly 9 millennia apart. That gulf invites the possibility that Plato's story was not invention, but recollection of something older still, passed down through broken memory. New discoveries continue to breathe life into the legend. Satellite and radar studies of the Sahara Desert have revealed ancient shorelines and lake beds, evidence that the region was once lush and inhabited. One structure in particular, the Rishat structure, or Eye of the Sahara, in Mauritania, has drawn attention for its concentric rings, roughly matching Plato's description of the Atlantean capital. The formation's size, symmetry, and geological features fit certain aspects of the story, though it is officially classified as a natural uplift eroded over time. Still, the coincidence is tantalizing. If the Risha structure once stood near a prehistoric coastline, it could indeed have inspired tales of a vanished city swallowed by the sea. The search for Atlantis has always been about more than geography. It is an investigation into the fragility of civilization and the persistence of memory. Each hypothesis, from the Aegean to the Atlantic, suggests that humanity once faced near extinction, a world-shattering event that survivors mythologized as divine punishment. Perhaps the true Atlantis lies not beneath one ocean but scattered across them all, its ruins forming a global mosaic of remembrance. A few modern geologists have proposed that abrupt sea level rise events, known as meltwater pulses, could have inundated vast areas of inhabited land within human memory. Meltwater pulse 1b, around 11,500 years ago, raised global seas by as much as 14 meters in just a few centuries. This coincides precisely with Plato's timeline and with legends of floods in Mesopotamia, India, and the Americas. The physical reality of these cataclysms lends new weight to old myths. Controversy deepens when one considers the architectural echoes shared across early civilizations. The step pyramids of Egypt, the ziggurats of Mesopotamia, the truncated temples of Central America, and even submerged structures off Japan's Yonaguni coast, all follow similar geometric logic. Conventional archaeology explains this as convergent evolution, independent societies discovering similar ways to stack stone for stability. But others suspect a faint cultural inheritance, a blueprint passed down from an older source, perhaps the same that inspired Plato's description of Atlantis's concentric architecture. In the quieter corners of academia, a more cautious hypothesis circulates that Atlantis represents the final flowering of Paleolithic society, a culture that mastered navigation, astronomy, and megalithic construction before climate collapse erased it. The builders of Göbekli Tepe, emerging from the chaos of the Younger Dryas, may have been its heirs, carrying forward fragments of knowledge from a drowned homeland. This theory bridges myth and archaeology without dismissing either. Yet the tale of Atlantis is also psychological, a mirror held to humanity's fears and aspirations. It embodies the tension between technological pride and natural vulnerability. In every era, the story re-emerges to remind us that progress is fragile, Even now, as oceans rise again under the warming skies of our own age, the parable of Atlantis feels less like fantasy and more like a premonition. Civilizations, no matter how mighty, are temporary guests upon a restless planet. Whether Atlantis was real or imagined, it continues to serve as a compass pointing toward an uncomfortable truth: that history may be deeper, older, and more cyclical than we care to admit. Beneath our cities and coasts may lie the ruins of others who once thought themselves permanent. And somewhere, under layers of coral and time, their stones may still whisper, not in warning, but in remembrance. In the shadow of the Giza Plateau, under the burning Egyptian sun, stand the most enduring symbols of human achievement: the Great Pyramids. Their immense size and perfect geometry have inspired awe for millennia. Yet beneath the admiration lies a question older than history itself. Are the pyramids truly products of Egypt's fourth dynasty? Or do their origins stretch back into an era now lost to memory? The debate is one of the most heated in archaeology, and it cuts to the heart of the mystery surrounding humanity's true antiquity. According to the official chronology, the Great Pyramid of Khufu was completed around 2560 BCE. Over 2 million limestone blocks, some weighing as much as 15 tons, were quarried, transported, and fitted with astonishing precision. Egyptologists credit this achievement to decades of organized labor under the pharaoh's command, using copper tools, sledges, and ramps. The conventional narrative sees it as the peak of Egypt's Old Kingdom engineering, the culmination of centuries of gradual development. Yet not everyone agrees. Some researchers argue that the monuments at Giza, and others scattered along the Nile, preserve evidence of a much older, more advanced phase of civilization. Historians are still debating the inconsistencies that fuel these alternative theories. The Sphinx, for instance, shows deep vertical fissures on its body, patterns of erosion that resemble water damage rather than wind-blown sand. Geologist Robert Shaw proposed that such erosion could only result from prolonged rainfall, last seen in Egypt at the end of the last ice age, roughly 10,000 years ago. If his analysis is correct, the Sphinx, and by association, perhaps the oldest structures at Giza, might predate the pharaohs by several millennia. The suggestion ignited controversy, dividing scholars between defenders of orthodoxy and those who see in these monuments the vestiges of a forgotten epoch. The Sphinx faces directly east, its gaze fixed on the rising sun. Some archaeoastronomers note that around 10 to 500 BCE, the constellation Leo would have risen precisely in front of it during the spring equinox. A coincidence too striking, they argue, to ignore. Could the monument have been designed to mark that celestial event? If so, it may commemorate a sky observed by people living long before recorded history, people who understood astronomy well enough to embed cosmic alignments into stone. The idea that the Giza complex functions as an ancient star map deepens the intrigue. The three pyramids mirror the layout of Orion's belt, and the Nile corresponds roughly to the Milky Way's position in the sky. Whether intentional or coincidental, the pattern evokes a civilization thinking on both earthly and celestial scales. Mainstream archaeology maintains caution. Correlation, after all, is not proof. Radiocarbon tests on organic material from the Great Pyramid's mortar date it securely to the 4th dynasty. Yet such findings only reflect the last phase of construction, not necessarily the earliest occupation of the site. What if the builders of Khufu's pyramid reused foundations, stones, or alignments inherited from predecessors long forgotten? Many ancient cultures, including the Egyptians, often built upon older sacred sites, preserving their orientation out of reverence. The Giza Plateau itself shows evidence of continuous habitation, suggesting that its origins may indeed be layered through time. Some alternative historians extend the story even further. They propose that Egypt's civilization did not emerge spontaneously, but inherited knowledge from a pre-dynastic source. perhaps survivors of the Great Flood remembered in Mesopotamian and biblical traditions. These hypothetical founders are sometimes referred to as the followers of Horus, semi-legendary beings said to have ruled Egypt before the first kings. The concept may blend myth with memory, a symbolic preservation of ancient wisdom passed down after a cataclysm. Whether real or allegorical, it fits the broader pattern of myths describing culture bearers arriving from ruined lands. The engineering of the Great Pyramid itself invites wonder beyond its age. The precision of its alignment to true north, within a fraction of a degree, would challenge modern builders using only primitive tools. Its base deviates less than 2 centimeters across 230 meters, an almost impossible tolerance for its era. Inside, the ascending passages and chambers align with specific stars, including Sirius and Thuban, the ancient pole star. The structure's proportions encode mathematical constants such as P and the golden ratio, though whether by design or coincidence remains debated. If intentional, these embedded harmonics imply a level of scientific understanding far beyond what conventional history attributes to the Fourth Dynasty. The debate over how the pyramids were built has persisted for generations. Theories range from massive ramps and sledges lubricated with water, to counterweights and levers, to speculative ideas involving sound resonance or lost technologies. None fully explain how millions of multi-ton blocks were lifted and positioned with surgical accuracy. Modern engineers attempting to replicate the process find it barely feasible, even with advanced machinery. Some argue that the builders possess techniques now forgotten, methods rooted in principles of vibration, magnetism, or geometry no longer understood. It is this combination of simplicity and precision that gives the pyramids their eternal sense of mystery. If one views Giza not as an isolated construction site but as part of a global pattern, its uniqueness begins to dissolve. Across the world, megalithic monuments share uncanny similarities. Cyclopean masonry in Peru, stone circles in Britain, and step pyramids in Mesoamerica all exhibit precision and astronomical alignment. Could these similarities reflect an inherited tradition, fragments of a shared ancestral knowledge? Mainstream scholars attribute them to convergent evolution of human ingenuity. Yet the synchronicity in both form and purpose suggests something more unified. The idea of a prehistoric architectural language, spoken in stone across continents, may sound speculative, but it haunts the imagination. In recent decades, satellite imaging has revealed hundreds of previously unknown pyramids and mounds buried beneath Egypt's sands. Some may date to periods older than the known dynasties. Meanwhile, seismic scans beneath the Sphinx have detected voids and chambers still unexplored. Speculation abounds that beneath the plateau lies a hole of records, a mythical library said to contain the wisdom of a vanished civilization, perhaps the same one that inspired the construction of Göbekli Tepe or the legends of Atlantis. No such chamber has been verified, yet the persistence of the legend testifies to humanity's instinct to seek continuity with its forgotten past. The Egyptian priest Manetho, writing in the 3rd century BCE, described a series of divine and semi-divine rulers who reigned for thousands of years before the known kings. To modern historians, his chronology is mythological, yet its alignment with other ancient traditions, from Sumer's king list to India's Yuga cycles, is curious. Each speaks of immense ages of civilization preceding the familiar record. Perhaps these were not literal reigns, but metaphorical memories of long epochs, hints that history, like the Nile, flows deeper than we can see. Standing at Giza today, one senses the weight of that hidden continuity. The stones radiate more than heat. They exude permanence, a silent defiance against time's erosion. Whether built in 2500 BCE or 10 millennia earlier, the pyramids remind us that intelligence, creativity, and ambition are not exclusive to modernity. They might be the inheritance of countless forgotten experiments in civilization, each rising, shining, and fading before the next began. As dusk falls over the desert and the stars awaken above the Great Pyramid summit, it is tempting to imagine that they, too, are remembering, twinkling witnesses to the cycles of creation that have shaped this world again and again. The sand may hide many stories, but stone remembers. Far to the west of Egypt, high in the thin air of the Andes, another mystery waits. The cold wind sweeps across plateaus strewn with massive stones, stones so heavy and precisely cut that even modern tools would strain to replicate them. These are the ruins of Tiwanaku and its sister site, Pumapunku, near the shores of Lake Titicaca in Bolivia. The Andean highlands, resting more than 12,000 feet above sea level, seem an unlikely birthplace for monumental architecture. Yet what remains here defies the imagination. Tiwanaku is officially dated to around 400 CE, considered the capital of a pre-Incan empire that flourished for centuries. But beneath the ruins lie deeper layers, radiocarbon dated to several thousand years earlier. Some researchers believe its foundations could reach back to 10,000 BCE, the same era as the end of the last ice age. The dating is controversial, but the precision of the stonework and the scale of the engineering continue to perplex even cautious archaeologists. The Gateway of the Sun, the most famous monument at Tiwanaku, stands as a single monolith weighing over 10 tons, carved from andesite, a volcanic rock so hard that shaping it with primitive tools seems nearly impossible. Its surface is etched with intricate reliefs, winged figures, solar symbols, and a central deity, possibly Viracocha, the Andean god of creation. Astronomers have long noted that the carvings align with solar events. The gateway's orientation captures the sun's rays during the solstices, functioning as both calendar and temple. The precision suggests that Tiwanaku's builders possessed detailed knowledge of celestial cycles, mathematics, and geometry. Historians are still debating whether such sophistication could have developed in isolation, or whether it hints at a deeper inheritance. The Incas themselves, when asked about the origins of Tiwanaku, claimed they did not build it, that it existed long before their ancestors arrived. They called it the work of the Viracochas, godlike beings who emerged after a great flood to restore order to the world. Similar myths echo across the Americas, survivors of cataclysmic deluge bringing architecture, agriculture, and astronomy to scattered tribes. The pattern mirrors tales from Mesopotamia and Egypt, suggesting a shared memory of loss and rebirth after global disaster. The site of Pumapunku, only a short distance away, magnifies the enigma. Scattered across the plateau lie immense H-shaped stone blocks, some weighing more than 100 tons. They're cut with sharp 90-degree angles, precisely drilled holes, and interlocking joints that fit together like pieces of a vast mechanical puzzle. To produce such surfaces requires machining accuracy, tolerances of less than a millimeter. Archaeologists attribute this precision to careful planning and long labor, with stone hammers and bronze chisels. But experimental attempts to reproduce these cuts using ancient techniques have failed to match the results. Magnetic surveys of Pumapunku reveal anomalies, subtle fluctuations suggesting high concentrations of metal within certain stones, or perhaps magnetite inclusions. Some fringe researchers interpret these as remnants of an unknown technology, though mainstream science remains cautious. Natural mineral deposits can cause similar readings, yet the placement of the stones, their geometric order, and the possibility of magnetized materials fuel persistent theories that Pumapunku may once have served as an energy or resonance site, an idea still unproven but strangely compelling. Adding to the mystery is the altitude. The nearest stone quarries are miles away, across rugged terrain. Transporting such colossal blocks without wheels or draft animals appears nearly impossible. The traditional explanation involves rolling the stones on wooden logs, but the Andean plateau has few trees, and the oxygen-thin air would have made large-scale labor punishing. This logistical paradox has led some to speculate that Tiwanaku was constructed not by brute force, but through lost knowledge of vibration, sound, or levitation, concepts that border on legend yet persist across ancient lore. There is also the question of erosion. Many blocks at Tiwanaku and Pumapunku show signs of weathering far beyond what a few thousand years could produce in this dry climate. Some geologists argue that the stones must have been exposed to heavy rainfall, conditions last seen here at the end of the Pleistocene, roughly 12,000 years ago. If correct, the structures may predate known Andean civilizations by millennia. The carvings of Tiwanaku hint at cosmic awareness. The stepped motifs and concentric designs resemble the shapes of planets, orbits, and even the molecular-like patterns of resonance. The Andean cross, or Hakarna, found throughout the region, is a symbol of three worlds: the underworld, the human world, and the celestial realm. Its geometry matches the layout of Tiwanaku's Akapana pyramid, a massive earthen mound once lined with cut stone and engineered to channel water in deliberate patterns. Some believe it represented the cosmos itself, a living model of the universe mirrored on Earth. Legends say that Tiwanaku was built in a single night by giants wielding fire from the sky. Such imagery could describe meteoric impacts or advanced tools lost to time. The local Aymara language preserves terms that predate Incan dialects, suggesting cultural continuity stretching back to prehistory. Yet even with linguistic and archaeological evidence, Tiwanaku's origins remain obscure. The deeper excavators dig, the older the site appears to become, a pattern that echoes across other megalithic locations around the world. Historians are still debating the chronology. Radiocarbon samples from organic remains provide inconsistent dates, possibly due to contamination from later human activity. Some layers point to a construction peak around 500 CE, others to far earlier epochs. The ambiguity invites both caution and speculation. Could Tiwanaku have been built atop an even older city, now buried beneath layers of sediment deposited by ancient floods? Geological evidence from Lake Titicaca's basin supports the idea that the area experienced sudden uplifts and water level changes, catastrophic events capable of submerging and then re-exposing vast territories. Modern scanning technologies have added new intrigue. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed rectilinear anomalies beneath Tiwanaku's surface, possible buried structures, perhaps even tunnels. In 2015, Bolivian archaeologists using sonar discovered submerged ruins beneath Lake Titicaca itself, including walls, terraces, and stone roads stretching for miles under the water. These findings suggest that an advanced culture once thrived around the lake before part of it sank. Whether these ruins belong to the builders of Tiwanaku or to an even earlier civilization is still uncertain. The broader question remains: was Tiwanaku a singular phenomenon, or part of a worldwide pattern of ancient high-altitude construction? From the Andes to the Himalayas, megalithic structures cluster at improbable elevations. Some see this as practical, stone lasting longer in dry mountain air. Others suspect spiritual reasoning, linking height with proximity to the divine. Yet another theory proposes that highlands offered refuge after catastrophic floods, when coastal civilizations drowned and survivors fled upward. In that interpretation, Tiwanaku was not the beginning of civilization, but a sanctuary, one of the last strongholds of a dying world. As the sun sets over Lake Titicaca, the stones of Tiwanaku glow with a quiet, golden light. They seem almost alive, watchful, enduring. Their builders are gone, their language mostly lost, yet their geometry remains precise, unyielding to erosion or time. Whether shaped by the ingenuity of early Andean peoples or by the hands of an older, forgotten culture, these monuments remind us that history may be less a straight path than a spiral, returning always to the same questions, carved in stone and waiting for the next civilization to ask them anew. Along the western coast of India, beneath the restless waters of the Arabian Sea, lies one of the subcontinent's most tantalizing archaeological mysteries. Divers who have explored the Gulf of Cumbat, once called the Gulf of Cambay, speak of vast geometric structures stretching across the seafloor, long walls, rectangular foundations, and what appear to be streets and canals buried beneath layers of silt. These formations, discovered in the early 2000s using sonar imaging, were initially dismissed as natural, but later expeditions recovered artifacts, pottery shards, beads, and even human bones that seemed to belong to an era long before the Indus Valley civilization. If genuine, they would push the timeline of urban life in India back thousands of years, perhaps to 9000 BCE, around the same time as Göbekli Tepe. The implications are profound. The Indus Valley, stretching from modern-day Pakistan to northwestern India, is already one of the world's earliest urban cultures. Its cities, such as Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, displayed sophisticated drainage systems, standardized weights, and carefully planned grids. Yet the discovery of submerged ruins off Dwarka and in the Gulf of Kumbat suggests that these achievements may have older roots, possibly reaching into the era before the great post-glacial floods. Historians are still debating whether these underwater structures are truly man-made. The strong currents and murky waters make excavation difficult, and samples are often contaminated. Some scientists argue that the so-called ruins are simply eroded rock formations shaped by natural forces. Others, pointing to the deliberate geometry and the discovery of ancient artifacts in their vicinity, insist that they once belonged to a thriving coastal city drowned when sea levels rose at the end of the Ice Age. Geological studies confirm that around 7,000 to 10,000 years ago, sea levels in the region were indeed much lower, and vast tracts of land now submerged would have been habitable plains. The mythology of India adds another layer to this puzzle. Ancient Sanskrit texts describe Dwarka, the fabled city of Lord Krishna, as a radiant metropolis built upon the sea, filled with golden towers and bustling harbors. According to the Mahabharata, after Krishna's death, Dwarka was swallowed by the ocean, vanishing beneath the waves. For centuries, the tale was regarded as allegory. Yet modern sonar scans have revealed structures off the coast of Gujarat that match the description remarkably well. Stone blocks, pillars, and a grid-like layout have been found at depths of over 30 meters. Carbon dating of associated artifacts suggests ages between 7,500 and 9,000 years. The results remain disputed. To some scholars, these discoveries represent a cultural bridge between the Mesolithic hunter-gatherers and the later Indus Valley urbanites. To others, they are evidence of a lost civilization altogether, one that flourished before the known dawn of Indian history, perhaps even before the great flood myths echoed across the world. The fact that similar flood legends appear in Mesopotamia, the Bible, and Mesoamerica suggests that these may not be isolated tales, but collective memories of real events. The Mahabharata itself contains passages that, when read through a modern lens, sound eerily technological. Descriptions of celestial weapons, bright as 1,000 suns, leaving the earth scorched and men blinded, have inspired speculation about lost science or symbolic retellings of cosmic cataclysms. Mainstream historians interpret these as poetic exaggerations, metaphors for divine wrath. Yet the precision of the imagery continues to fascinate those who suspect that the ancients encoded fragments of scientific memory within myth. Further inland, at the site of Mehrgarh, archaeologists unearthed evidence of advanced settlement as early as 7,000 BCE, long before the rise of Mesopotamia or Egypt. The inhabitants practiced agriculture, crafted jewelry, and engaged in long-distance trade. This continuity between prehistoric Mehrgarh and later Indus Valley cities suggests that South Asia may have sustained a civilization far older and more complex than once believed. If coastal settlements like Dwarka existed concurrently, their submergence could explain why early Indian history seems to begin abruptly, as if an earlier chapter were erased. Recent discoveries have expanded the enigma. Off Poompuhar, on India's eastern coast, underwater surveys have found circular structures and brickwork that appear to belong to an ancient harbor city. The Tamil epic Silapathikaram speaks of a lost land called Kumarikandam, a vast continent south of India that sank beneath the sea, taking with it an advanced culture. While most historians consider this legend a regional adaptation of the global flood motif, the coincidence of oral tradition and geological possibility keeps the debate alive. Submarine geology supports the likelihood of catastrophic flooding in the Indian Ocean basin. Around 12,000 years ago, melting glaciers caused rapid sea level rise, drowning continental shelves. In the Bay of Bengal, sonar has mapped features resembling river channels and terraces far below current depths, remnants of ancient landscapes. These findings align with the timeline of post-glacial flooding that also submerged parts of Southeast Asia, where similar ruins have been found near Yonaguni in Japan and off the coast of Indonesia. The persistence of cultural memory in Indian mythology is striking. Many texts describe cycles of creation and destruction, the yugas, each ending with a flood or cosmic reset. The Satya Yuga, the first age, is said to have been a time of harmony and divine wisdom, gradually decaying through the subsequent ages until catastrophe renewed the world. Such cycles echo the geological rhythm of Earth itself, periods of stability followed by sudden upheaval. The parallel between mythic time and natural time is difficult to ignore. Historians are still debating whether these ancient narratives arose independently or stemmed from shared prehistoric experience. Some linguists trace similarities between Sanskrit, Sumerian, and early Indo-European mythologies, suggesting the possibility of an ancestral cultural nexus long before recorded history. If early mariners or survivors of a vanished civilization spread across continents after the floods, their stories could have seeded the legends of gods, heroes, and lost lands from India to the Mediterranean. Archaeological evidence of ancient navigation adds weight to the theory. Prehistoric maritime trade existed along the Arabian Sea long before the Indus civilization flourished. Shells, beads, and ceramics found in Mesopotamian ruins trace their origin to India's western coast. It is entirely plausible that a seafaring culture, now forgotten, once connected these regions. If rising seas obliterated its ports, it would explain why only fragments remain inland. The debate over the Gulf of Khumbat ruins remains unresolved. Critics point out the lack of definitive artifacts, while proponents argue that the site's immense size, extending over several kilometers, cannot be dismissed as natural coincidence. Future excavations may provide answers, but for now, the mystery endures like a mirage shimmering beneath the waves. As twilight falls over the modern city of Dwarka, fishermen still tell stories of lights beneath the sea, glimmers they say belong to Krishna's golden city, where the mythal memory, their words resonate with a truth older than history, that civilizations rise where water allows and fall when water returns. The Indian coast, like so many across the world, is not merely a boundary between land and ocean, but a frontier between what is known and what has been forgotten. Perhaps, beneath the rhythmic pulse of the tide, the drowned cities of India still sleep, monuments to an age when humanity first learned to build, to measure the heavens, and to lose everything to the sea. Scattered across the vast Pacific, where the ocean swallows both sky and memory, lie fragments of another forgotten world. From the basalt ruins of Nan Madol to the towering statues of Easter Island, the scattered islands of Oceania hold whispers of civilizations that rose and fell long before written history reached them. Together, they form a haunting question that mirrors those of Giza, Tiwanaku, and Dwarka. Who were the ancient architects of these lonely stone monuments? And what knowledge did they possess that now lies drowned beneath the waves? Nan Madol, often called the Venice of the Pacific, sits off the eastern shore of Pohnpei in Micronesia. It consists of nearly 100 artificial islets constructed from massive basalt columns, interlaced with canals that once shimmered under torchlight. Archaeologists date the complex to around 1000 CE, built by the Sodalur dynasty. Yet local oral traditions insist it was founded much earlier, by two brothers who flew across the ocean, bringing stones with them through the air. The basalt prisms used in its construction weigh up to 50 tons each, quarried miles away and somehow transported across the water without cranes, wheels, or metal tools. The site's scale and precision defy its isolation. Nan Madol covers over 200 acres, with walls rising nearly 10 meters above the lagoon. The layout forms a grid, a deliberate plan, not the haphazard growth of a fishing village. It includes temples, tombs, and what appears to be a centralized administrative core. How such a massive architectural project emerged on a remote island with no known written language and limited resources remains one of the Pacific's great enigmas. Historians are still debating the site's origin. Some argue that Nan Madol's megalithic style evolved independently, while others see it as evidence of wider oceanic contact, possibly linked to ancient maritime cultures predating Polynesia. Theories abound. Some suggest a migration from Southeast Asia's lost coastlines, others from South America, or even an earlier maritime civilization erased by rising seas. The ocean currents between these regions make such contact plausible, even in prehistory. Nan Madol is not alone in its mystery. Thousands of miles to the east, on Rapa Nui, Easter Island, colossal stone heads known as moai gaze over the sea. Their expressions solemn and unreadable. Each statue can weigh up to 70 tons and stand more than 10 meters tall. Carved from volcanic tuff, they were transported across the island's rugged terrain and erected on platforms called ahu, perfectly aligned with astronomical events and sight lines to other monuments. The level of coordination required to plan and move these giants has long baffled researchers. According to local tradition, the moai walked to their places, guided by chance and the power of mana, a spiritual force that could animate the inanimate. Scientists explain their transport as a combination of rocking, ropes, and ingenious balancing. But the myth of walking statues persists because it captures something essential: that the builders possessed knowledge beyond brute strength, perhaps of balance, rhythm, and harmony with nature itself. Easter Island's tragedy, however, offers a stark warning. The society that erected the moai eventually collapsed, possibly due to deforestation, overpopulation, or internal conflict. The island's isolation turned grandeur into ruin. In this sense, Rapa Nui is a microcosm of the planet, a closed system where abundance can lead to destruction. Yet what fascinates archaeologists is not just its fall, but its connections. Genetic studies have revealed traces of pre-Columbian contact between Polynesians and South Americans, suggesting that voyagers crossed the Pacific centuries before European explorers. If true, the builders of these distant stone worlds may have shared more than trade. They may have shared stories, myths, and perhaps even memories of lands lost to the sea. To the south, another legend adds to the web: the submerged continent of Mu, said to have stretched across the Pacific before sinking beneath the waves. The idea of Mu originated in the 19th century, later dismissed by scholars as pseudo-archaeology. Yet the persistence of flood legends across Polynesia, tales of islands swallowed overnight, of ancestors fleeing rising tides, suggest that these myths might preserve genuine memories of post-glacial sea level rise. Entire archipelagos may once have been connected, forming trade networks now separated by thousands of miles of water. The Pacific, vast and restless, conceals more than it reveals. Beneath its surface lie entire drowned landscapes, ancient volcanoes, coral plateaus, and terraces that were dry land only 12,000 years ago. Sonar mapping has revealed flat-topped seamounts resembling eroded city foundations. Though most are geological formations, still, certain patterns, right angles, symmetrical ridges, leave open the question of whether human hands once shaped them. In the waters around Japan's Yonaguni Island, for example, lies an underwater complex that looks unmistakably architectural. White terraces, steps, and stone pillars stretching along the seabed, the structure has sparked decades of debate, with some experts calling it a natural formation and others insisting it bears signs of tool work. In Polynesia, the oral histories are remarkably consistent. They speak of ancestors who followed the stars from a homeland far to the west, a place destroyed by fire, earthquake, and flood. The Maori of New Zealand remember Hawaii, the Hawaiians recall Kahiki, and across countless islands, variations of this lost homeland appear. Whether these were poetic metaphors for earlier migration routes or dim recollections of a vanished land, they reinforce the theme found everywhere else on Earth: a great civilization lost, remembered only in fragments of story and stone. Scholars have begun to reconsider the sophistication of ancient Pacific navigation. Long before compasses or sextants, Polynesian voyagers traversed thousands of miles using only the stars, ocean currents, and bird migrations as guides. Their double-hulled canoes were marvels of engineering, stable, swift, and capable of carrying families, livestock, and cargo. These voyages were not random wanderings but organized expeditions, guided by oral maps passed through generations. Such mastery of the sea suggests a deep understanding of astronomy and mathematics, echoing other early cultures' fixation on celestial order. Some scientists propose that Pacific navigation preserves knowledge inherited from much older seafaring traditions, perhaps those of Ice Age coastal peoples displaced by rising waters. When the world's oceans surged, those with ships would have survived, carrying not only goods but memories of the civilizations they left behind. The idea is speculative, yet it fits the pattern observed elsewhere: sudden disappearances, flood myths, and the reappearance of advanced skills in unexpected places. Historians are still debating how far back organized maritime culture extends. Stone tools found on islands near Indonesia and Australia suggest human crossings as early as 50,000 years ago, long before the end of the Ice Age. If those early navigators could traverse open seas, it is conceivable that their descendants developed maritime societies far earlier than conventional history allows. Their settlements, built along ancient coastlines, now rest hundreds of feet beneath the ocean, erased by time and tide. As evening descends over the Pacific, its surface glows like molten glass, and one can almost imagine the silhouettes of lost cities beneath it, the temples illuminated by torches, their harbors filled with sails that caught both wind and starlight. Whether they were real or symbolic, these visions haunt the imagination because they touch on something universal: the desire to understand where we came from and how much of our story remains untold. Perhaps the ocean itself is the great archive, a library of worlds drowned and preserved, waiting for the patient diver, the sonar pulse, or the wandering thought to uncover them again. Beneath every wave lies a fragment of humanity's first attempts to master the planet, a record written not in ink or stone but in silence. The Pacific, vast and inscrutable, may yet reveal that we are not the first to dream of empire, nor the first to lose it to the sea. At the southernmost edge of the planet, locked beneath miles of ice, lies the most forbidding and least explored continent on Earth, Antarctica. To most, it is a place of pure desolation, a white emptiness stretching from horizon to horizon. Yet to others, it is the stage for one of history's strangest enigmas: the possibility that Antarctica was once free of ice, and that beneath its frozen crust may lie the ruins of a civilization older than any known to humanity. This notion sounds impossible at first. Antarctica has been entombed in ice for millions of years, or so the textbooks say. But recent studies complicate that story. Ice core data and geological surveys reveal that the continent's climate has not always been so brutal. There were periods, particularly around 120,000 years ago, and again during warm intervals in the Pliocene epoch, when parts of the landmass were temperate, covered in forests, lakes, and flowing rivers. Fossilized leaves, pollen grains, and the remains of reptiles confirm this once green past. But even more intriguingly, certain coastal regions, according to some researchers, may have been ice-free as recently as 12,000 years ago, around the same time the last ice age ended elsewhere. If true, this overlap with human prehistory invites unsettling questions. Could Antarctica have supported life, even civilization, before it froze? And if so, could traces of that lost world still lie buried under its glaciers, preserved like insects in amber? The modern fascination with this idea began with an ancient map. In 1513, the Ottoman admiral and cartographer Piri Reis compiled a world map from older sources, some said to date back to Alexander's time. The map, discovered in Istanbul in 1929, depicted the coastlines of Europe, Africa, and South America with surprising accuracy. But what startled researchers most was the inclusion of a southern land mass resembling Antarctica, shown not as an ice-covered wasteland but with rivers, bays, and mountains. The precision of its latitude and shape led some to believe the map's creator had access to ancient charts made before the continent froze. Historians are still debating how to interpret the Piri Reis map. Some attribute its detail to educated guesswork, medieval geographers extrapolating the existence of a southern continent to balance the known world. Others insist that its depiction aligns too closely with modern seismic scans of Antarctica's subglacial terrain to be coincidence. These scans, using radar and gravity measurements, reveal mountain ranges and valleys buried beneath the ice that match certain features on the old map. If that similarity is real, it would mean that some ancient civilization mapped Antarctica thousands of years before modern exploration, a feat that should have been impossible. This anomaly is not unique. Other early maps, such as the Orontius Phineus map of 1531 and the Boachi map of 1737, also portray Antarctica free of ice, with river systems and mountain ranges corresponding eerily to what scientists have since confirmed beneath the glaciers. Skeptics argue that these cartographers relied on speculation, inspired by classical texts describing Terra Australis, the southern land, yet the precision of their coastlines, combined with accurate longitudinal positioning centuries before the invention of the marine chronometer, keeps the debate alive. Modern discoveries have only deepened the mystery. In the mid-20th century, seismic surveys during Operation High Jump and later expeditions detected large anomalies beneath the ice, immense cavities, heat sources, and what appeared to be buried structures or geological formations inconsistent with known terrain. Satellite imaging in the early 2000s added to the intrigue when thermal readings revealed unusual patterns of heat emanating from specific regions, including one near the coast known as Wilkes Land. Some researchers speculated that these might be volcanic hotspots or subglacial lakes warmed by geothermal activity. Others, less conventionally, suggested they could be the remnants of human or even pre-human construction, entombed and fossilized by ice over eons. The discovery of Lake Vostok, hidden beneath nearly 4 kilometers of ice, further complicated matters. Sealed off from the surface for millions of years, this massive subglacial lake, larger than Lake Ontario, contains liquid water, sustained by geothermal heat and immense pressure. When Russian scientists drilled into it, they discovered microbial life unlike any known species. If life could survive there in total isolation, it raises the question of what else might endure beneath Antarctica's frozen shell. Entire ecosystems could exist in darkness, preserved and evolving in secrecy. Some scientists now speculate that Antarctica may have been ice-free enough in certain coastal zones to host humans, or pre-humans, during the late Pleistocene, around the time of the Younger Dryas. Geological evidence shows that sudden shifts in Earth's crust, perhaps triggered by mass redistribution of ice or external impacts, could have moved parts of the continent toward the poles, plunging them into cold. This Earth crust displacement theory, popularized in the mid-20th century, remains controversial. but it provides a mechanism by which an ancient temperate region could have become the frozen continent we know today, burying any traces of civilization beneath thousands of feet of ice. Historians are still debating how far to take such interpretations. Mainstream science sees no proof of advanced human activity in Antarctica, only the tantalizing coincidences of geography and myth. Yet new discoveries continue to push back the boundaries of known prehistory. Fossilized forests, petrified wood, and the remains of complex ecosystems prove that the continent once teemed with life. If intelligent beings ever walked there, whether human, proto-human, or otherwise, their remains would be hidden beyond current reach. Even myths seem to conspire in Antarctica's favor. Ancient Sumerian, Egyptian, and Andean traditions all speak of sacred lands to the south, realms of eternal cold or light, where gods descended or departed. The Greeks placed Hyperborea there, a land of perpetual spring hidden beyond the north wind, though later scholars suggested it might have been south instead of north, confused by lost maps and shifting poles. The convergence of these stories across cultures separated by oceans suggests that humanity's collective memory may preserve some dim recollection of Antarctica's warmer past. Today, scientists drilling deep ice cores in East Antarctica uncover evidence of dramatic climate shifts occurring over mere centuries, abrupt warmings and coolings that could have rendered parts of the continent briefly habitable. Seismic imaging reveals buried mountain ranges, such as the Gamburtsev Mountains, whose peaks rival the Alps yet remain unseen beneath the ice. These hidden landscapes invite comparison to mythical continents, entire worlds fossilized in silence. In recent years, satellite radar and gravimetric mapping have identified geometric anomalies in several regions, rectangular patterns, regular spacing, or unusual angular formations. Most are explained as natural fractures or optical illusions, but some remain unexplained. Independent researchers claim to have found dome-like shapes and linear corridors under the ice, though official agencies dismiss these as digital artifacts. The lack of transparency surrounding Antarctica's exploration, with most regions restricted under international treaty, only fuels speculation that something extraordinary may lie hidden there. Still, perhaps the truth is both simpler and stranger. Antarctica, once a cradle of forests and rivers, became the planet's most perfect time capsule. If an ancient civilization perished there, its ruins may be perfectly preserved, awaiting discovery when technology allows deeper penetration of the ice. Or perhaps it holds not a lost city, but the fossilized record of an earlier Earth, a mirror of our own fate should climate and time once again turn against us. The idea that Antarctica once supported life, and perhaps civilization, is both thrilling and humbling. It reminds us that the world we inhabit is impermanent, that continents shift and memories freeze. The silence of Antarctica is not emptiness, it is a pause, the planet holding its breath, keeping secrets too vast for words. Somewhere beneath that endless white plain, deep below the coldest winds on Earth, a story of an earlier world may sleep, waiting for the ice to melt, and for history to begin again. Around 12,800 years ago, something extraordinary happened. The Earth, emerging from the chill of the last ice age, suddenly plunged back into cold. Temperatures dropped within mere decades. Massive species, mammoths, mastodons, giant ground sloths, vanished in what scientists call the Younger Dryas extinction. For centuries, glaciers advanced again, forests died, and the world's delicate climate balance fractured. Then, just as suddenly, warmth returned. Civilizations would later rise upon the lands uncovered by retreating ice. Yet in this violent swing between freeze and thaw, something more than nature may have been lost. Entire chapters of human prehistory, perhaps whole cultures, may have perished, leaving behind only myths of deluge and fire. Historians are still debating what caused this abrupt climate chaos. The traditional explanation points to shifts in ocean currents, particularly a disruption of the North Atlantic circulation as glacial meltwater poured into the sea. This would have cooled Europe and North America, plunging them back into Ice Age conditions. But a growing number of scientists believe the trigger was far more dramatic, a cosmic impact. Around the beginning of the Younger Dryas, layers of black sediment appear across multiple continents, filled with microscopic diamonds, magnetic spherules, and high concentrations of iridium, all hallmarks of an extraterrestrial event. This layer, found in sites from North America to Syria, suggests that fragments of a disintegrating comet may have struck the planet, igniting vast wildfires and blanketing the atmosphere in soot. Such an impact could have destroyed large animal populations, melted ice sheets, and darkened the skies for years. Some researchers connect this catastrophe to the mysterious extinction of the Clovis culture, one of the earliest known human societies in North America. Their finely crafted spear points vanish abruptly from the archaeological record just as the Younger Dryas began. The coincidence is hard to ignore. The comet hypothesis remains controversial. Critics argue that natural processes like volcanic activity or spontaneous forest fires could account for the evidence. But new findings keep emerging. Layers of melt glass in South Carolina resembling those formed by atomic blasts, nanodiamonds found in Greenland's ice cores, traces of platinum consistent with extraterrestrial material. Together, they paint a picture of sudden, planetary-scale destruction. If the theory is correct, then the Younger Dryas was not simply a cold snap. It was a global reset. For cultures living at that time, such an event would have been apocalyptic. Across the globe, ancient myths describe a world consumed by fire before being drowned by flood. The Sumerians wrote of a deluge sent by the gods. In Egypt, the Book of the Heavenly Cow speaks of divine retribution raining from the sky. Native American legends recall fiery serpents streaking through the heavens, followed by the burning of forests and the freezing of rivers. These stories, once dismissed as metaphor, now echo the geologic record with uncanny accuracy. If an advanced society had existed before this disaster, coastal, maritime, dependent on stable climates, it would have been utterly erased. Sea levels rose by more than 100 meters as glaciers melted. Entire continental shelves vanished beneath the waves, drowning any cities or harbors that might have lined Ice Age coasts. In this light, the myths of Atlantis, Mu, and other lost lands take on new context. They could be cultural memories of a real event, the global flood that ended the Pleistocene. Recent discoveries lend weight to this possibility. Submerged ruins off the coast of India, Japan, and the Bahamas coincide with ancient shorelines that would have existed before the flood. At Göbekli Tepe, built soon after the Younger Dryas ended, carvings depict animals and celestial symbols that some researchers interpret as records of the comet impact itself. A vulture holds a sphere in its claws. Nearby, a scorpion appears under a pattern resembling a meteor shower. Astronomers calculated that these constellations align with the sky as it appeared around 10,150 BCE, the very onset of the Younger Dryas. If true, Göbekli Tepe may have been both a temple and a memorial to a world destroyed. The Younger Dryas also coincides with dramatic changes in human society. Before the cataclysm, people were hunter-gatherers scattered across fertile plains. Afterward, they began to settle, farm, and build. Some anthropologists propose that the trauma of the disaster forced humanity to adapt, to store food, organize labor, and seek protection from nature's unpredictability. In this sense, civilization may have arisen not from abundance, but from desperation. Catastrophe forged complexity. Still, the possibility remains that survivors of an older, more advanced culture played a role in this transformation. If such a civilization had existed, perhaps seafaring, perhaps global, its survivors would have fled inland or to higher ground as coastlines vanished. They might have shared fragments of their knowledge with the scattered peoples who remained. The sudden appearance of megalithic architecture, astronomical calendars, and complex myths around 10,000 BCE could be the distant echo of that exchange. Historians are still debating how to interpret this pattern. To mainstream scholars, it represents the natural evolution of human ingenuity after millennia of experimentation. To others, it looks like a spark, a transmission of memory from a civilization wiped clean by the sea. Either way, the transition from Ice Age to Holocene marks a turning point in the human story, the moment when prehistory blurred into history and myth became the last refuge of truth. Geological records confirm that the end of the Younger Dryas was as sudden as its beginning. Temperatures rose sharply, glaciers retreated, and ocean levels surged in massive pulses. Meltwater, Pulse 1b, occurring around 11,500 years ago, may have raised seas by as much as 20 meters in just a few centuries. Entire landscapes transformed within human lifetimes. Imagine the terror. Coastlines swallowed, islands disappearing, forests drowned. For those who lived through it, the world would have seemed to die and be reborn. Even today, scientists struggle to explain how such rapid change was possible. The comet impact hypothesis provides one mechanism. Orbital variations and feedback loops from melting ice provide another. Some research has even suggested a combination, that a celestial strike destabilized global climate systems already teetering on the edge. Whatever the cause, the result was catastrophic. In geological terms, the Earth flinched, and perhaps, somewhere within that chaos, an older civilization, one that had mastered navigation, astronomy, or architecture, was lost. Its people may have watched fire rain from the sky, their cities crumble, and the sea consume their knowledge. They would have fled inland, carrying only memory. Over generations, those memories became stories of gods and floods, stories that we still tell. The Younger Dryas is no longer just a climatic curiosity. It is a reminder that the planet's equilibrium can shatter overnight, and that every civilization, no matter how advanced, lives at the mercy of cosmic and geological forces it can barely comprehend. If the catastrophe truly erased a previous great culture, then the remnants of its existence are likely scattered, encoded in stone alignments, myths, and the faint anomalies of archaeology. The world we know may simply be its successor, rebuilding from ashes without ever realizing what came before. When the ice finally receded and warmth returned, humanity stood blinking in the new sunlight, surrounded by ghosts of an age erased by nature's fury. The first temples rose soon after, monuments not of triumph, but of remembrance. They mark, perhaps, the beginning of civilization as we define it, and the end of another that the earth has chosen not to remember. When archaeologists first brushed away the desert sand to reveal strange metallic relics or anomalous carvings that didn't belong to their expected era, they realized that history might not be as linear as it seemed. The deeper they dug, the more confusing it became. Tools of impossible precision, remnants of forgotten alloys, and artifacts that appeared millennia before their supposed invention, each one a quiet whisper from a world that should not have existed. These out-of-place artifacts, or rupots, continue to challenge the established narrative of technological progress, suggesting that humanity's path to knowledge may have begun and ended more than once. Consider the Antikythera mechanism, recovered from a shipwreck off the coast of Greece in 1901. Corroded and fragmented, it appeared at first to be just another piece of bronze debris. But decades of study revealed it to be an ancient analog computer, a complex system of interlocking gears capable of predicting eclipses, planetary movements, and the timing of the Olympic Games. Its internal design required mathematical and engineering knowledge comparable to that of Renaissance clockmakers, yet it dates to around 100 BCE. For centuries after, no machine of comparable sophistication would exist. Historians are still debating whether it represents a unique invention or evidence of a lost lineage of ancient technology, a remnant of knowledge passed down from earlier, now vanished civilizations. Elsewhere, the Baghdad battery, clay jars with copper and iron components discovered near modern-day Baghdad, has fueled speculation about ancient electricity. While mainstream scholars interpret them as simple storage vessels, or possibly electroplating devices, their design could theoretically generate a low voltage. In isolation, the object seems trivial, but when viewed in the broader context of ancient technologies, from Roman concrete that still resists time, to Damascus steel whose molecular structure modern metallurgy struggles to replicate, it paints a picture of civilizations more experimentally capable than often acknowledged. Historians are still debating whether these artifacts signify isolated genius or surviving fragments of a deeper technological tradition. In India's ancient texts, particularly the Vedas and Mahabharata, descriptions of mechanical flying chariots called vimanas and weapons of intense light have led some to hypothesize advanced prehistorical science, cloaked in mythology. Mainstream historians interpret these tales as allegory, yet the vivid technical language, detailing propulsion, alloys, and even energy sources, remains unsettlingly specific. The same uncanny pattern emerges in stone. Around the world, megalithic architecture demonstrates engineering beyond its supposed means. The precision-cut stones of Sacsayhuaman in Peru, interlocking with such tight tolerances that even a knife blade cannot slip between them, was shaped from andesite, a rock harder than steel. The basalt pillars of Baalbek's Trilithon in Lebanon weigh over 800 tons each, quarried and moved across uneven terrain with no visible method that modern machinery could easily replicate. In Egypt, drill cores found within granite show spiral grooves consistent with modern power tools rather than simple abrasives. Skeptics attribute these anomalies to craftsmanship honed by time and patience, but the degree of uniformity and the evident knowledge of resonance, leverage, and balance suggest principles perhaps inherited from a lost era of experimentation. It is tempting to dismiss such claims as romantic exaggerations, yet even in mainstream archaeology, examples of forgotten technologies abound. The ancient Romans created hydraulic cement that could set underwater, a formula lost for nearly 2 millennia. The Nabateans engineered desert water collection systems so efficient that modern engineers study their design for sustainable reuse. In the Indus Valley, uniform brick measurements and sanitation networks point to centralized planning unseen again until modern urbanism. Humanity, it seems, repeatedly invents, forgets, and reinvents its genius. A growing number of researchers suggest that rather than being outliers, these technologies are rediscoveries, echoes of innovations from earlier civilizations wiped out by catastrophe. If the Earth truly experiences cyclical resets, through comet impacts, volcanic winters, or magnetic reversals, then knowledge could easily perish with its carriers, leaving behind only mysterious relics for future generations to puzzle over. There are smaller, stranger discoveries that refuse to fit anywhere. Metallic spheres found in South African mines, perfectly balanced and grooved, embedded in rock dated to billions of years old. Though geological processes may explain them, they fuel speculation about deep time intelligence. In Russia's Ural Mountains, tiny coil-shaped objects made of tungsten and molybdenum have been found in sediments tens of thousands of years old. In Peru's Nazca Desert, massive geoglyphs stretch across miles of sand, depicting animals and geometric patterns visible only from the sky, an engineering feat requiring surveying methods supposedly unknown to pre-Columbian peoples. Each of these examples is explainable in isolation, yet together they form a mosaic of curiosity, a quiet defiance against the assumption that progress is linear. Historians are still debating how advanced ancient metallurgy truly was. The Iron Pillar of Delhi, standing for more than 1,600 years without rusting, suggests chemical knowledge ahead of its time, Analysis reveals the presence of a protective oxide layer that forms naturally through its unique composition, a phenomenon only recently understood. In China, intricate bronze castings from the Shang dynasty exhibit lost wax precision, centuries before similar methods appeared in Europe. These discoveries remind us that technology does not march forward uniformly. It blooms in scattered bursts, sometimes flaring brightly, then disappearing without trace. Some modern thinkers propose that human civilizations may undergo cycles of technological amnesia. Each cycle reaches a point of mastery in architecture, metallurgy, astronomy, before a cataclysm or gradual decline erases the infrastructure of knowledge. Myths of divine punishment, the fall of golden ages, and the wrath of gods might be collective memories of such collapses. The Tower of Babel, for example, could be interpreted as an allegory for a civilization that reached too high, its unity shattered by catastrophe. The mystery deepens when considering how ancient sites align with one another across the globe. The Great Pyramid of Giza, Machu Picchu, Easter Island, and Angkor Wat all lie along a nearly perfect great circle route around the Earth, a geometric coincidence some researchers call the ancient global grid. Whether this alignment is deliberate or coincidental, it suggests an awareness of planetary geometry that should not have been possible without modern surveying tools. Were these alignments intentional, they might point to an understanding of Earth's energy fields or a symbolic mapping of the heavens onto the planet, a knowledge perhaps preserved from a vanished epoch. There are also artifacts that seem to defy historical context entirely. The Dendera light relief in Egypt, interpreted by some as depicting an electrical device, Roman dodecahedrons whose purpose remains unknown, and the Phaistos disc, inscribed with a language no one can read. Each mystery invites endless hypotheses: astronomical calculators, cult symbols, navigational tools, but all share one unsettling quality. They appear to belong to a broader system of understanding that has not survived. Modern science approaches these puzzles cautiously, grounded in evidence but aware of how easily bias shapes interpretation. The line between discovery and belief is thin. Yet even the most skeptical archaeologists acknowledge that history is incomplete, its record fragmented by disaster and decay. Technologies can vanish, and once they do, they take their explanations with them. What remains are clues, gears without schematics, symbols without context, fragments without stories. It is possible that the Antikythera mechanism and its kin are not isolated miracles but remnants of a forgotten continuum, a lineage of experimentation stretching back into prehistory, interrupted again and again by cataclysm. Each rediscovery sparks anew what was once lost, as if humanity's memory lies buried not just in soil, but in its own imagination. Perhaps every invention is a form of remembering, and if this is true, if the echoes of past brilliance still resonate in the metal, stone, and myth left behind, then the so-called anomalies of archaeology are not errors at all, they are invitations. They remind us that somewhere beneath the polished surface of recorded history lies another, older story, one in which the light of technology is flickered before, burned brightly, and vanished into darkness, only to be kindled once more by hands that believe they are the first to strike the spark. Every human carries an archive older than civilization, a biological record written not in ink or stone, but in the language of genes. It is through these microscopic sequences that humanity's true history may still whisper, unaltered by the passing of time. While archaeology digs into the soil, genetics excavates memory itself. In recent decades, scientists mapping ancient DNA have discovered anomalies that defy simple explanation. Genetic echoes suggesting that our species' origins and migrations might be far more tangled, and perhaps far older, than the textbooks allow. According to current science, all modern humans descend from a small population that lived in Africa roughly 200,000 years ago. From that genetic bottleneck emerged the lineage that would spread across the world. Yet, Within that grand migration story, there are fractures, traces of unknown ancestors that do not fit neatly into the known branches of the human family tree. As genome sequencing has improved, researchers have identified ghost lineages, genetic signatures belonging to extinct hominins never found in the fossil record. These spectral ancestors contributed small but measurable portions of DNA to modern humans, then vanished without a trace. Who were they? And how did their knowledge and genes intertwine with ours before disappearing? Historians are still debating how to interpret these findings. One possibility is that these lost hominins were regional variants of Homo erectus or Denisovans, adapted to environments from Asia to Oceania. Another, more radical theory suggests that some of these lineages might represent earlier intelligent populations, civilizations erased by time or catastrophe long before the Ice Age ended. While mainstream science stops short of endorsing such speculation, the idea that advanced behavior could have arisen, vanished, and resurfaced across deep time is gaining traction. Mitochondrial DNA, inherited maternally and mutating at predictable rates, provides a timeline of human ancestry. It reveals that all living humans share a common maternal ancestor, often called mitochondrial Eve. Yet the more genomes scientists map, the more complex the story becomes. Populations in Melanesia, for example, carry genetic material not found in Africans, Europeans, or Asians, DNA that appears to come from an unidentified archaic species. Similarly, isolated groups in the Amazon and South Pacific share inexplicable markers linking them to ancient Australians. These links predate the accepted timeline for intercontinental contact, implying that early humans may have migrated or communicated across oceans long before modern history began. The discoveries raise an unsettling question: how much of what we call human innovation might be inherited, not invented? Some anthropologists suggest that the burst of technological creativity seen in prehistory, the sudden emergence of art, tools, or symbolic thought, may reflect the reactivation of dormant knowledge encoded within humanity itself. If earlier civilizations once thrived and fell, their legacy could survive in the genome as predispositions, instincts, or latent capacities awaiting rediscovery. In that sense, memory may not reside solely in stories or ruins, but in biology. In Siberia's Denisova cave, researchers unearthed a fragment of bone belonging to a young girl. Her genome revealed she was the child of a Neanderthal mother and a Denisovan father, a hybrid between two distinct species. The discovery confirmed what had long been suspected: that early humans interbred across species boundaries, exchanging not just DNA but culture and survival skills. Some of these inherited traits, immune responses, altitude adaptation, or cold resistance, remain active in modern populations. Others may carry deeper imprints, perhaps influencing cognition, language, or even our drive toward technology. It is conceivable that traces of long-lost intelligence still move through us, guiding progress like a faint ancestral memory. The idea of genetic inheritance as cultural continuity finds echo in myth. Nearly every civilization tells of first ancestors, divine beings who shaped humanity and passed on sacred knowledge. In Sumerian lore, the Anunnaki descended from the heavens to fashion humankind. In ancient Egypt, the god Thoth gifted writing. In Mesoamerica, Quetzalcoatl brought maize and measurement. To modern ears, these are myths of creation. But what if they are symbolic memories of genetic inheritance, of knowledge and capacity passed from one epoch of intelligent life to another, through biological as well as cultural transmission? Historians are still debating the sudden leap in human cognition that occurred around 50,000 years ago, the so-called Great Leap Forward. In this narrow window, humans began to create art, bury their dead with ritual, and form complex languages. Archaeological evidence of this transformation appears simultaneously across continents, as if humanity awoke at once. Geneticists propose that a mutation affecting neural wiring may have triggered this shift. Yet others wonder whether it was not mutation, but memory, the resurfacing of abilities once dormant, reactivated in a species rebuilding itself after catastrophe. In modern genomes, scientists have identified sequences of junk DNA, vast regions with no known function. Once dismissed as evolutionary debris, these regions are now being re-examined. Some appear to act as regulatory networks, influencing how genes express in response to environment. Others contain repeating patterns so complex that they resemble coded systems. While this is not evidence of hidden messages, it challenges the assumption that our genetic record is purely random. Nature, after all, is economical. It rarely preserves what has no purpose. Some biologists quietly speculate that these vast uncharted regions may store deep ancestral adaptations, perhaps even memories at the molecular level. The Silurian hypothesis, originally framed to ask whether industrial civilizations could leave detectable geological signatures, also applies metaphorically to genetics. If life is cyclical and intelligence re-emerges again and again, might DNA serve as nature's hard drive, encoding fragments of ancient learning that later species unconsciously access? Though speculative, the notion resonates with the way intelligence evolves in bursts rather than smooth curves. Humanity's periodic surges in creativity, the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, the scientific revolution, might be viewed as echoes of prior awakenings, rippling through time. More tangibly, genetic anthropology reveals that humanity's history is one of survival through cooperation and migration. After every collapse, volcanic winters, ice ages, pandemics, small groups adapted, interbred, and carried fragments of lost knowledge forward. The human genome is thus a living museum of extinct lineages, each mutation a fossil of adaptation. Our blood remembers what our minds forget. Even diseases bear witness. Resistance to certain pathogens points to epidemics lost to prehistory, recorded only in the immune systems of their descendants. Yet perhaps the most mysterious genetic evidence lies not in humans, but in what coexists with us. Over 8% of the human genome originates from ancient viruses that infected our ancestors. These retroviral sequences, now dormant, once altered our biology and behavior. Some researchers suggest that they may have influenced the development of the placenta, even aspects of consciousness. In a sense, we are composites, part human, part ancient code. The memory of past life is literally written within us. If there were civilizations before ours, intelligent species or earlier human cycles, their legacy might not be ruins or artifacts, but genetic influence. We would carry their echo unknowingly, through instincts, creativity, and our ceaseless urge to rebuild. Each new beginning would therefore not be new at all, but a continuation of something ancient, reshaped and forgotten. In this light, humanity itself becomes a vessel for the planet's memory. Our cells are time travelers, carrying within them not only the record of our own species, but perhaps the dreams of those who came before. Every heartbeat is a resonance from the deep past, every thought a flicker of ancient fire reignited in modern form. The true inheritance of civilization may not lie buried in stone cities or sunken temples, but in the quiet codes spiraling within every one of us, proof that history does not merely repeat, but reincarnates. Long before the rise of modern nations, before pyramids or cathedrals or even cities of stone, ancient peoples told stories about beginnings and endings, about gods descending from the heavens, floods that reset the world, and survivors who rebuilt civilization from ruin. These myths, scattered across continents, seem at first to be products of imagination. Yet when studied side by side, they reveal remarkable similarities, as though humanity shares a single memory encoded in 1,000 tongues. Perhaps, within these stories, lie the last fragments of a real history, a mythic blueprint of the world before ours. The Sumerians, who emerged suddenly in Mesopotamia around 4000 BCE, spoke of a time when kingship descended from heaven. The earliest records describe cities that existed before the Great Flood: Eridu, Bad Tibera, Larak, and Shuruppak, ruled by divine kings who reigned for thousands of years. The Sumerian king list, carved in cuneiform, lists these pre-Diluvian rulers with reigns so long they seem absurd, tens of thousands of years. Historians interpret these numbers symbolically, yet they echo the timelines found in Egypt and India, where gods and demigods ruled for epochs before handing the world to humans. In Egypt, this concept was formalized into the Zep Tepi, the first time. It was said to be an age when the gods themselves walked the earth, teaching architecture, astronomy, and law. The god Thoth, patron of writing and knowledge, was said to have inscribed these teachings in secret chambers, a library of the first civilization hidden beneath sacred ground. Many ancient temples were believed to be copies, restorations of these divine blueprints. The priests of Heliopolis called their city a microcosm of heaven, built to mirror the original cosmic order. If this was metaphor, it was a precise one. Every major Egyptian temple aligns astronomically, as though constructed according to an inherited celestial map. Across the ocean, the Maya told of successive worlds destroyed and renewed. Their sacred book, the Popol Vuh, recounts 4 creations. In the third, humanity was made of wood, hollow, soulless beings who failed to honor their creators. They were swept away by a flood, their descendants transformed into monkeys. The gods then created humans from maize, the sacred plant that sustains life. Similar tales arise in Hindu cosmology, where each cycle of creation, or yuga, ends in cataclysm before the world is born anew. The pattern repeats endlessly: rise, decay, and rebirth. Historians are still debating whether such parallels arise from shared experience or shared psychology. Floods, after all, are universal. They come to every river valley, yet the precision of the motifs, divine teachers, pre-flood civilizations, astronomical wisdom, suggests more than coincidence. Could these stories be distorted memories of a real civilization that perished at the end of the Ice Age? The survivors, scattered across the globe, might have carried fragments of its knowledge, weaving them into myth as their descendants rebuilt. Linguistic evidence adds another dimension. Comparative mythology reveals a set of archetypal myths that recur across distant cultures: a civilizing hero who brings fire or law, a serpent or dragon symbolizing chaos, a flood that purges corruption, and a divine promise of renewal. These motifs appear from the Andes to Mesopotamia to the Pacific. Psychologists such as Carl Jung viewed them as expressions of the collective unconscious, timeless symbols emerging from the human mind itself. But some historians argue that their geographical spread hints at a shared origin in an ancestral civilization that predated written history. Archaeology supports at least part of this hypothesis. The oldest known myths often correspond geographically to regions that experienced catastrophic flooding at the end of the last ice age: the Black Sea Basin, the Persian Gulf, and the Sunda Shelf near Indonesia. Around 11,000 BC, these areas were vast fertile plains, later submerged by rising seas. Genetic studies trace many modern populations back to refuges near these drowned lands, suggesting mass migration. The myths of gods descending from the sky might therefore record the arrival of refugees, not from heaven, but from sinking homelands. One of the most striking patterns in myth is the motif of the teachers from the sea. In Sumer, it was Owans, a being half man and half fish, who emerged from the Persian Gulf to instruct humanity in writing and architecture. In the Andes, Viracocha rose from Lake Titicaca after a great flood, teaching agriculture and astronomy. In Polynesia, the god Tangaroa brought navigation and canoe building. In Egypt, Osiris arrived from across the waters, bearing gifts of civilization. The pattern repeats too precisely to ignore. Whether symbolic or historical, it suggests that human memory preserves the image of knowledge arriving from beyond the waves, perhaps from survivors of a drowned world. Historians are still debating whether myth can preserve factual information for thousands of years. Recent studies of Aboriginal Australian oral traditions show that stories of sea level rise have survived for more than 10,000 years, accurately describing the drowning of specific coastal landmarks. This suggests that myth can indeed serve as a vessel of memory, transmitting real events long after written language fades. If so, the flood myths may be less invention than recollection. The mythic blueprint extends beyond stories into architecture. Many ancient monuments mirror celestial events with uncanny precision. The pyramids of Egypt align with Orion, the temples of Angkor Wat with the constellation Draco, the Mayan city of Teotihuacan mirrors the Milky Way's shape. Even Stonehenge marks solstices and lunar cycles. These shared patterns of sky worship imply a universal legacy of astronomy, a knowledge system too consistent to have arisen independently everywhere at once. Perhaps it was the inheritance of that first time, when humanity saw the heavens as both map and mirror. The persistence of serpent symbolism adds another clue. In nearly every mythology, serpents or dragons embody both creation and destruction, from the Sumerian Tiamat to the Chinese Lung to the Norse Jörmungandr. In Mesoamerica, Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, was the bringer of wisdom. The recurring image may represent a comet or celestial event, a fiery serpent crossing the sky during a cataclysmic epoch. Such imagery could have encoded real astronomical observations into myth, transforming disaster into theology. It is possible that humanity's myths are not just stories, but data, analog records of cosmic and geological events, encoded in symbol. When read this way, myths form a kind of prehistorical archive. Floods, fire, and serpents are metaphors for impacts, eruptions, and extinctions. The gods descending from the sky could represent survivors bringing knowledge from elsewhere. In this sense, mythology becomes the collective memory of the species, disguised as faith. Modern scholars of comparative mythology argue that ancient stories behave like genetic material. They mutate, recombine, and adapt to new environments while preserving a common core. Just as DNA carries biological memory, myth carries cultural memory. Both evolve, yet neither forgets. If this is true, then the world's oldest legends may be the only surviving records of civilizations that lived and died before the written word. To dismiss myth as fantasy is to underestimate the endurance of human memory. In every temple and tale, a pattern persists, a cosmic order restored after chaos, a fire rekindled after flood. Whether symbolic or literal, these recurring motifs suggest that humanity remembers more than it realizes. Beneath the poetry of gods and heroes may lie the echo of something real, an ancient world destroyed and reborn, again and again. And perhaps this is the greatest secret buried within the mythic blueprint, that civilization itself may be the universe's way of remembering its own past. Each time it perishes, it leaves behind not only ruins, but stories, blueprints for those who come after. Through these whispered maps of fire and water, flood and renewal, humanity traces the outline of its forgotten ancestors, following myths back toward memory, and memory back toward truth. If the legends of lost civilizations seem poetic, modern science has begun asking a question that transforms poetry into hypothesis. What if intelligent life, not human, but industrial, had already existed on Earth millions of years before us? And if it had, could we ever prove it? This question, known as the Silurian hypothesis, takes its name from an unlikely source, a fictional race of ancient reptilian scientists from British television. Yet behind its whimsical name lies a profound scientific inquiry. The premise is deceptively simple. If an industrial civilization had once flourished deep in the geological past, long before humans evolved, would any trace of it remain today? The Earth's surface is a restless machine. In less than 10 million years, weathering, erosion, and tectonic activity erased nearly every sign of what came before. Mountains rise, continents drift, and seabeds swallow whole landscapes. Human civilization, if extinguished tomorrow, would vanish almost completely within 10,000 years. Steel rusts, concrete crumbles, and glass disintegrates into sand. Only fragments of plastic polymers, radioactive isotopes, and altered sediments would hint that we were ever here. On geological time scales, even these signals would blur into natural background noise. So if humanity's legacy could vanish so quickly, what hope would that be of detecting an industrial society from, say, 100 million years ago? Historians are still debating whether the geological record could preserve such evidence. The Silurian hypothesis, proposed by astrophysicist Adam Frank and climatologist Gavin Schmidt, is not a claim that ancient civilizations existed. Rather, it's a thought experiment about detectability. They asked what kinds of long-term planetary markers advanced species might leave behind. Their conclusion was sobering: almost none. Cities, artifacts, and machines would not survive. But chemical fingerprints, changes in isotopic ratios, abrupt warming events, and synthetic compounds might linger in the sedimentary record. In essence, if we wanted to find the fossil of a civilization, we'd have to look not for ruins, but for climate change. The reasoning stems from how humanity itself is altering the planet. Industrial activity is reshaping the atmosphere, leaving behind distinct traces: massive spikes in carbon dioxide, nitrogen isotopes from fertilizer, heavy metals from mining, and plastics scattered from pole to pole. Geologists call this new epoch the Anthropocene, the age of humans. But to a future geologist millions of years from now, these layers would simply appear as an abrupt geochemical anomaly, a thin, planet-wide stratum signaling a sudden, intense burst of industrial activity, followed by silence. It would look as though an intelligent species fled briefly, transformed its environment, and vanished. The scientists behind the hypothesis noted that Earth's deep past already contains several such anomalies. The Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, PETM, roughly 56 million years ago, saw global temperatures soar by 5 to about 8 degrees over a few thousand years. Carbon isotope ratios during that event resemble those of fossil fuel emissions today. Could it have been triggered solely by natural volcanic activity, or something more unusual? The mainstream explanation points to methane release from ocean sediments, yet the pattern is eerily familiar. It's as though the planet has experienced versions of our present crisis before. Historians are still debating the scale and speed of those past transitions. Some extinction events show abruptness inconsistent with slow natural processes. If an earlier civilization had reached industrial capability, burning hydrocarbons, manufacturing plastics, altering land and sea, the traces would look remarkably similar to these unexplained spikes. And while it's highly improbable, it's not impossible. As one scientist put it, the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, especially when time itself erases the evidence. In this view, the Earth could be a palimpsest, a manuscript written over again and again, each new civilization erasing the last. Life, it seems, has a tendency toward complexity. Given 4 billion years of evolution, intelligence may have arisen many times. Perhaps it appeared in forms unrecognizable to us: oceanic species building societies of coral and enzyme, or forest intelligences communicating through bioluminescent spores. These possibilities border on science fiction, yet they serve a purpose: to humble the notion that humanity is unique. The Silurian hypothesis also invites a shift in perspective. If we ever discover fossilized traces of an ancient civilization, it may not be of ourselves, but of a species that preceded us by millions of years. Imagine finding an anomalous layer of microplastics embedded in rock from the Jurassic period, or isotopic signatures of combustion in the Silurian era, 420 million years ago, when complex life was just beginning to colonize land. It would rewrite everything we know about Earth's history and force us to confront the unsettling idea that intelligence, like life itself, might be cyclical. Some geologists have begun to re-examine ancient strata with this idea in mind. Sedimentary cores from the ocean floor reveal peculiar chemical transitions, spikes in heavy metals, sudden carbon releases, and layers of ashen soot. While these are generally attributed to volcanic activity or asteroid impacts, some features, like the fine distribution of certain compounds, defy easy explanation. Could these anomalies be the weathered remains of ancient industrial byproducts, compressed and transformed beyond recognition? It remains speculation, but the question itself broadens the scope of inquiry. If intelligent species once existed before humans, their extinction might follow predictable patterns. Rapid industrialization, resource depletion, and climate destabilization would trigger cascading collapse, precisely the trajectory humanity now follows. In that sense, the Silurian hypothesis is not just theoretical, it's cautionary. It suggests that the very act of civilization leaves a signature of destruction so brief that it vanishes almost as soon as it appears. Every technological species, perhaps, burns through its planetary inheritance before it learns to live within it, and most never do. The possibility of deep-time civilizations also reframes how we search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Instead of listening for radio signals or scanning for lights in distant galaxies, scientists might look for planetary spectra, atmospheric anomalies indicating industrial pollution around exoplanets. In other words, the best way to find aliens may be to look for planets already poisoned by their own civilizations. Earth, too, might once have been such a world, or could become one again. Historians are still debating the philosophical implications. If multiple waves of intelligence have risen and fallen across geological ages, then humanity's story is neither the first nor the last. Civilization becomes less a triumph than a recurrence, an experiment life repeats whenever conditions allow. Each iteration leaves faint traces, geological scars that hint at the possibility of memory older than species. This idea does not diminish human achievement, it expands it. To exist at all within a cycle so immense is miraculous. And if intelligence is a recurring phenomenon, then we are part of something vast, a continuum stretching through time, perhaps even through worlds. The Silurian hypothesis, in its quiet, scientific way, restores mystery to the Earth. It suggests that beneath our feet may lie the compressed remains of civilizations long turned to dust, their triumphs reduced to chemistry, their ruins folded into the planet's bones. Whether or not such predecessors ever existed, the thought itself has value. It forces us to consider how fragile civilization truly is, and how easily the record of our existence might vanish. One day, millions of years from now, some future species may dig through layers of rock and find our own thin stratum, a brief pulse of carbon, metal, and plastic. They may wonder who we were, what we built, and how we vanished so quickly. And in their wonder, perhaps they will see themselves reflected, another spark in the long, recurring story of intelligence rising, shining, and fading upon an ancient, patient world. Throughout the ancient world, there are whispers of a forgotten language, not of words, but of resonance. Stones that hum when struck, temples that vibrate at certain frequencies, chambers that seem to sing when the wind moves through them. These phenomena have long puzzled archaeologists, engineers, and mystics alike. Could it be that ancient builders understood sound, not merely as art or ritual, but as a form of power? Some believe that the monuments we admire today were not only built for worship but designed as instruments, machines of vibration, tuned to the frequencies of the earth itself. Sound, after all, is physical. It moves through air and stone, shaping the material world. Modern science shows that resonance can levitate objects, carve patterns into dust, and even alter molecular structures. The study of cymatics, the visualization of sound vibrations, reveals geometric forms identical to those found in ancient art. Spirals, hexagons, lotus patterns, and fractal lattices. Historians are still debating whether this is coincidence or continuity, whether ancient architects, without modern technology, somehow perceived these hidden harmonies. Consider the Great Pyramid of Giza. Long thought to be a tomb, it contains no inscriptions, no confirmed burial, and chambers whose acoustics are mathematically perfect. When sound is produced inside the king's chamber, certain frequencies reverberate powerfully, creating standing waves that amplify rather than fade. Engineers studying the pyramid's internal dimensions have found that its layout produces resonant frequencies corresponding to 440 Hz, the same tuning standard used in modern music. To ancient Egyptians, such resonance might not have been musical at all, but spiritual, a way to interact with cosmic energy or the Earth's magnetic field. Elsewhere, similar anomalies appear. The Hippodrome of House Affliani in Malta, an underground temple more than 5,000 years old, possesses chambers that amplify sound in ways that defy explanation. A voice speaking at the right frequency can cause the entire structure to vibrate, creating auditory illusions and deep, subsonic tones that affect the human nervous system. Archaeologists believe these acoustic properties were deliberate, not accidental. The site may have been used for trance or healing rituals, exploiting sound to alter consciousness. In South America, the temples of Chavinda Huantar in Peru, one of the continent's oldest known religious complexes, are designed with labyrinthine passages that channel water and winds to produce deep roaring sounds. Researchers have shown that conch shell trumpets found there could generate low frequencies capable of resonating through the entire structure. To those inside, the building would have seemed alive, breathing and groaning like a living being. Historians are still debating whether such architecture was symbolic or functional, a means of summoning the divine through vibration, or perhaps an ancient understanding of resonance as energy manipulation. Ancient legends often describe sacred stones that could be moved by sound. In Tibetan and Incan lore, monks or priests raised immense blocks through the coordinated use of drums, horns, and chanting. European explorers in the 19th century recorded stories of stones floating like clouds when certain musical tones were played. Mainstream historians dismiss these as myths, yet physics shows that acoustic levitation is real. Standing waves can suspend small objects in midair. On a different scale, resonance can shatter glass or move tons of material when frequencies align with structural vibrations. Could the ancients have harnessed such principles using primitive yet precise instruments? The idea seems fantastic, yet fragments of supporting evidence persist. The megalithic stones at Stonehenge resonate when struck, producing distinct bell-like tones. Some are so finely balanced that they hum in the wind. Archaeologists have confirmed that ancient builders deliberately selected specific stones for their acoustic properties. In the temples of Abu Simbel, deep in the Egyptian desert, the inner sanctum is constructed so that sunlight strikes the statues of gods precisely twice a year, and, curiously, the chamber resonates at low frequencies on those same dates, as if sound and light were meant to converge. Historians are still debating the relationship between sound and architecture in these monuments. Were these designs merely aesthetic, or did they serve practical functions, enhancing speech, guiding ritual, or inducing altered states? In many traditions, sacred sound is not metaphorical, but mechanical. Sanskrit mantras, for instance, are described as vibrations that sustain creation. In ancient China, bronze bells were tuned to frequencies believed to harmonize with planetary movements. The Mayans built pyramids that echo like the call of the quetzal bird when clapped at their base. These patterns suggest a shared recognition of the earth as a resonant instrument, one that could be tuned, sung to, and perhaps even healed. Modern researchers exploring megalithic sites have detected magnetic and electromagnetic anomalies associated with certain stone arrangements. At Avebury and Karnak, compasses behave erratically. At Machu Picchu, magnetometers record fluctuations when the wind changes. Some hypothesize that these sites were intentionally placed on points of natural energy, locations where geomagnetic forces are strongest, and that resonance from sound or ritual could amplify these effects. To skeptics, this sounds like pseudoscience. To others, it points to a lost science of harmonics, a discipline uniting physics, music, and spirituality long before such divisions existed. It is not difficult to imagine why such knowledge would fade. As civilizations collapsed or shifted, the symbolic layer of their practices, the rituals, the chants, survived, while the empirical understanding of a resonance was forgotten. Over time, what had once been acoustic engineering became mysticism. The temples remained, but their original purpose became cloaked in myth. Recent studies have revived this ancient curiosity. Acoustic engineers have recreated the soundscapes of Stonehenge, Malta, and Giza, discovering that these monuments amplify human voices and instruments to powerful effect. The findings suggest that ancient architects understood how vibration could shape emotion, perception, and even physiology. In a way, they were early scientists of consciousness, manipulating resonance to access altered states or to stabilize the rhythms of collective ceremony. Yet the deeper implication is even more intriguing. If sound can alter matter, if resonance can shape energy fields, then ancient monuments may represent the earliest attempts to interact with the planet itself, to tune its frequencies, to stabilize its rhythms, to maintain harmony between human society and Earth's electromagnetic pulse. Perhaps this is why megaliths align with solstices and magnetic grids. They are not just markers of time, but instruments in a planetary orchestra. Historians are still debating whether such ideas can ever be proven. The evidence is circumstantial, the interpretation speculative, but the persistence of the motif across Egypt, Peru, China, and beyond hints that sound was once seen as the fundamental creative force. In the beginning was not the word, but the vibration. Every temple, every carved chamber, may have been an attempt to speak that original tone again, to bridge the human and the cosmic through harmony. In that sense, the language of stone and resonance may be humanity's oldest inheritance, predating writing and even speech. It is the hum of the planet rendered in architecture, a reminder that long before civilization learned to build upward, it first learned to listen. Across continents and centuries, ancient builders appear to share an unspoken knowledge of the earth, an intuition not just of its surface, but of its invisible currents. From the British Isles to the Andes, temples, pyramids, and standing stones were placed with uncanny precision along invisible pathways that later generations would call ley lines. Whether myth or forgotten science, these alignments have long stirred fascination. Were they random, or did ancient peoples truly understand something about the planet's magnetic structure, a natural grid of energy that once guided the placement of their sacred sites? The concept of ley lines entered popular imagination in the early 20th century, when Alfred Watkins, a British antiquarian, noticed that ancient landmarks, churches, mounds, and monoliths seemed to align across long, straight paths stretching for miles. He proposed that these lines represented prehistoric trade routes, marked by early travelers who used natural ridges and sightlines. But as more patterns emerged, the coincidences grew too striking to ignore. Temples, burial sites, and megalithic circles across Europe formed precise geometric networks, often aligned with sunrise and sunset points or magnetic north. Watkins' pragmatic theory soon evolved into something deeper. Perhaps these lines traced not roads, but forces, invisible rivers of energy shaping both landscape and consciousness. Historians are still debating whether such alignments are intentional or illusory. Skeptics attribute them to coincidence, a byproduct of humans seeking patterns in chaos. Yet archaeological surveys reveal that many sacred sites across cultures share common orientations to magnetic north, or significant solar and lunar events. The pyramids of Egypt, the ziggurats of Mesopotamia, the great circles of Britain, and the Nazca lines of Peru all exhibit astonishing directional precision. To align structures so accurately without compasses or satellite data implies that ancient builders observed the heavens and the earth with remarkable sophistication, or that they had instruments or methods now lost to time. Modern science lent unexpected support to some of these ancient intuitions. The Earth is wrapped in a magnetic field generated by the motion of molten iron in its core. This field fluctuates and sometimes reverses entirely, creating regions of magnetic anomaly, places where compasses spin unpredictably, where birds migrate off course, where electrical currents behave strangely. Many ancient monuments happen to sit atop these anomalies. In China, imperial architects aligned palaces and tombs along the dragon lines, geomagnetic meridians believed to channel qi, the vital energy of the land. In Mesoamerica, temples followed similar principles, constructed on serpent paths of telluric current. To the Egyptians, these were paths of the gods; to the Druids, spirit roads. The names differ, but the pattern is unmistakable. Some researchers suggest that ancient people could physically sense these energies. Certain locations generate measurable differences in electromagnetic frequency and natural radioactivity, subtle enough to escape notice, yet sufficient to affect human perception. Studies at Stonehenge and Avebury, for instance, record geomagnetic variations far higher than surrounding terrain. Shamans and priests might have chosen these places because they induced altered states of awareness, allowing communion with what they perceived as divine. In this sense, temples were not merely shrines, but amplifiers, architectural resonators built where the planet itself was already singing. At Machu Picchu, magnetic compasses behave erratically. The site rests atop a granite ridge rich in quartz, a mineral known to generate piezoelectric currents when compressed. Earthquakes and shifting tectonic pressures could thus create natural energy pulses through the stone, subtle vibrations that ancient builders may have harnessed. Similar patterns appear at Delphi, where Greece's most famous oracle delivered her prophecies above fault lines emitting ethylene gases that induce trance states. The overlap between geology, magnetism, and sacred geography suggests that the ancients did not simply guess where to build, they listened to the earth. Historians are still debating whether these placements were guided by practical observation or mystical intent. It is possible that temple builders, after generations of experience, noticed correlations between certain landscapes and states of inspirational healing. Over time, these observations became codified into ritual and myth. Yet another theory proposes something more deliberate, that ancient civilizations mapped the planet's geomagnetic grid with mathematical precision, constructing their monuments at nodal points where these invisible lines intersect. When plotted globally, sites such as Giza, Easter Island, Angkor Wat, and the Nazca Plateau fall along arcs and intersections forming near-perfect geometry, as though the Earth itself were designed according to a harmonic blueprint. Satellite mapping and magnetic field studies have revealed that many of these locations also correspond with gravity anomalies and crustal boundaries, areas where natural energy exchange between the planet's interior and surface is strongest. To some, this coincidence implies that ancient builders somehow detected these forces. Modern instruments confirm that such regions exhibit measurable differences in radiation, magnetism, and even atmospheric ionization, phenomena that could influence weather, plant growth, or biological rhythms. The ancients, Observing these subtle effects might have encoded them into their cosmologies, aligning architecture to balance or harness them. The Chinese practice of feng shui preserves elements of this ancient science. Its principles, the orientation of structures according to flow, direction, and elemental harmony, parallel the geomagnetic alignments of temples worldwide. In the Andes, Incan engineers aligned roads and shrines along Sikhs, radiating lines that converged at the Temple of the Sun in Cusco. These lines served both practical and spiritual functions, organizing the empire's geography into a cosmic grid. In Britain, similar alignments connected hill forts, stone circles, and holy wells, suggesting that the mapping of sacred geometry was a global tradition, not a regional anomaly. Could this shared understanding arise purely by chance? Or does it point to a common inheritance, a legacy of geophysical awareness passed down from an older civilization that once spanned continents? Advocates of the global grid theory argue that these patterns are too systematic to be coincidental. They propose that ancient peoples built their monuments as nodes in an energy network, a planetary web that maintained equilibrium between nature and culture. If such a system once existed, it would explain why certain ancient sites still evoke awe and serenity. They resonate, literally and symbolically, with the Earth's field. Modern experiments have begun testing these ideas. Sensitive magnetometers detect fluctuations in electromagnetic activity at megalithic sites, correlating with solar and lunar cycles. Acoustic tests reveal that standing stones amplify low-frequency vibrations, suggesting a synthesis of sound and magnetism, two expressions of energy intertwined. Some physicists, though cautious, admit that ancient builders might indeed have exploited environmental phenomena unknowingly, achieving effects that seem mystical but unnatural. Others suspect conscious design, an ancient science of georesonance, long forgotten. Historians are still debating how much intentionality can be ascribed to these alignments. Yet even skeptics concede that humanity once had a profound connection to the Earth's rhythms. Our ancestors navigated by stars, planted by lunar phases, and felt magnetic directions in their bones. In that context, the placement of monuments along energy lines may reflect not superstition, but sensitivity, a lost art of attunement. The magnetic Earth still hums beneath our feet, though few notice. Every second, solar winds stir its field, auroras dance near the poles, and electrical currents surge invisibly through soil and stone. The ancients might have called this spirit, or breath of the world. Today we call it electromagnetism. The language differs, but the phenomenon remains the same. Perhaps, then, the energy grids of old were less about mystical forces than about communion, a conversation between civilization and planet. The stones, the temples, the lines drawn across mountains and seas were humanity's first attempt to map not just geography, but harmony. If the Earth truly does sing, those monuments were the first notes ever written in response. Long before written language, humanity measured the heavens. The proof lies carved in stone, constellations etched into cave walls, solstices encoded in ancient corridors, and monuments aligned so precisely with celestial events that even modern astronomy still marvels. From the equatorial jungles to the northern tundra, ancient civilizations watched the same stars and drew the same conclusions, that time, fate, and divinity were written in the night sky. Yet the precision of their measurements raises a question that modern science still cannot answer. How did they know so much, so early? The story begins not with telescopes, but with shadows. The earliest astronomers used nothing more than stone pillars or wooden stakes to trace the sun's arc across the seasons. These primitive observatories evolved into sacred architecture. Stonehenge, perhaps the most famous, aligns perfectly with the midsummer sunrise and midwinter sunset. Its central axis captures the solar cycle with accuracy, that would require careful measurement over generations. Similar alignments exist at Nabta Playa, an ancient megalithic circle buried in Egypt's desert sands, predating Stonehenge by nearly 2 millennia. The stones there mark both the summer solstice and the rising of Sirius, a star whose heliacal rising heralded the annual Nile flood. The knowledge encoded in these monuments suggests not simple observation, but long-term, methodical study. Historians are still debating how such early societies achieved this astronomical precision. Mainstream explanations credit patient observation, generations of skywatchers noting patterns, translating them into ritual calendars, but others suggest a deeper inheritance, the survival of celestial knowledge from an earlier epoch, passed through oral tradition after a global disruption. If that were true, the megaliths and temples of the ancient world might not represent the beginning of astronomy, but its restoration. Nowhere is this theory more tantalizing than in Egypt. The 3 Great Pyramids of Giza align not only to true north with astonishing accuracy, but also correspond to the belt stars of Orion. Their orientation suggests deliberate imitation of the heavens, as above, so below principle embodied in architecture. The shafts inside the Great Pyramid point directly toward Orion's belt and Sirius, connecting the pharaoh's soul with the stars. For a culture obsessed with eternity, this celestial alignment symbolized resurrection. To die was to return to the stars from which the gods came. Yet these alignments are not unique to Egypt. Across the ocean, the Mayan temples of Chichen Itzá track equinoxes with equal mastery. During the spring and autumn equinox, sunlight and shadow form the image of a serpent descending the pyramid steps, a perfect astronomical illusion built with architectural genius. The Maya also developed one of the most accurate calendars in human history, predicting solar eclipses and planetary cycles with mathematical precision. Meanwhile, in the Andes, the Inca constructed solar pillars, sucancas, that measured solstices and guided agricultural planting. In the Far East, Chinese astronomers recorded supernovas and mapped the zodiac centuries before Europe rediscovered the stars. This global fascination with the heavens is no coincidence. Ancient societies depended on celestial patterns for survival, to predict floods, seasons, and harvests. But their skywatching transcended pragmatism. The stars were seen as a reflection of the divine order, a cosmic script written for those who could read it. Temples became observatories, and priests became astronomers, or perhaps the other way around. Modern researchers have found even older evidence of astronomical awareness. The Lascaux caves in France, painted around 17,000 BCE, include dots resembling the Pleiades cluster and the constellation Taurus. On another continent, in Göbekli Tepe, the world's oldest known temple, dating to around 9600 BCE, stone pillars display carvings of animals arranged in patterns matching constellations visible during the Younger Dryas. Some researchers believe that one relief depicts a comet striking Earth, correlating with the very event that may have triggered the Ice Age's end. If correct, this would mean that the builders of Göbekli Tepe not only observed celestial events, but encoded them for posterity, turning myth into memory through astronomy. Historians are still debating whether this ancient astronomical sophistication could have developed independently in so many places. The problem is not that early humans observed the stars, all cultures do, but that they achieved levels of precision suggesting instruments or methods far beyond simple naked-eye observation. For instance, the alignment of Machu Picchu's Intihuatana stone captures the equinox so exactly that its shadow disappears entirely for a few moments twice a year. Such accuracy implies advanced geometry and long-term sky mapping. One hypothesis proposes that these ancient astronomers inherited mathematical constants, such as the golden ratio or pi, from unknown predecessors. These constants recur in megalithic architecture across the world, from the pyramids of Egypt to the temples of Angkor Wat. The same proportions that define planetary orbits and sound harmonics also define human sacred spaces. Was this convergence accidental, or was it guided by a forgotten understanding of cosmic harmony? Even more mysterious are the so-called star maps carved or painted in ancient structures. Aboriginal Australians depict constellations identical to those known in the Northern Hemisphere, despite millennia of isolation. In the ruins of the Dogon people of Marley, oral tradition speaks of Sirius as a binary star system, a fact only confirmed by telescopes in the 20th century. Skeptics attribute such knowledge to coincidence or modern contamination of myth. Yet the consistency of astronomical precision across unconnected cultures suggests something more deliberate. The mathematical structure of ancient calendars deepens the mystery. The Mayan long count, the Hindu Yuga system, and the Sumerian sexagesimal cycle all divide time in remarkably similar ways, using base units of 60, 360, and multiples of 72. These numbers correspond to the Earth's axial precession, the slow wobble of the planet's rotation over 26,000 years. That precession was officially discovered by the Greek astronomer Hipparchus around 150 BCE. Yet megalithic sites built thousands of years earlier seem to reflect knowledge of it. Alignments shift minutely over millennia. To correct for precession requires long-term observation or inherited data. If such knowledge truly predates recorded civilization, where did it come from? Some scholars suggest that survivors of a pre-Ice Age culture preserved fragments of astronomical lore through myth and geometry. After the global floods, they may have rebuilt and re-encoded their knowledge into new monuments. In this view, the world's sacred architecture, from Teotihuacan to Karnak, represents a single ongoing conversation with the cosmos, written in stone across thousands of years. Historians are still debating whether the same minds that measured the stars also understood their deeper implications. The ancients saw celestial cycles not as mechanical but as moral, reflections of rise and fall, order and chaos. When the stars drifted, empires fell. When they realigned, renewal came. Time itself was cyclical, not linear. Perhaps this worldview arose because humanity had already experienced collapse once before. A cosmic reminder carved into the heavens. The sky, after all, is the only constant. Civilizations vanish, languages fade, but constellations endure. To those who lived before writing, the stars were the memory of the earth, an unbroken archive stretching back to creation. The alignment of temples and pyramids was not merely worship but synchronization, an attempt to keep humanity in tune with the rhythm of the cosmos. Whether through patient observation or inherited science, ancient astronomers built the first bridges between heaven and earth. And so, as night falls over their ruins, one can still stand where they stood and watch the same constellations rise. The patterns they followed continue unchanged, their meanings perhaps forgotten but their presence eternal. The stars have not moved, only we have. Yet somewhere in that slow, celestial drift lies a reminder. Humanity has always been looking upward, tracing the same lights, wondering the same thing, not when the story began, but whether it has already been told before. The deeper archaeologists dig, the more they encounter a quiet pattern, evidence of sudden beginnings. Civilizations appear as if from nowhere, fully formed, with writing systems, astronomy, architecture, agriculture, and social hierarchies already intact. Sumer, Egypt, the Indus Valley, and the Andes. Each arises abruptly in the archaeological record, not as slow evolutions from primitive tribes, but as renaissances. The question is not how they advanced, but where they learned to do so. This pattern, repeated across continents, has led some historians to consider a possibility once dismissed as myth, that humanity's first civilizations were in fact second civilizations, inheritors of a much older legacy. The Sumerians are often called the world's first urban people. Around 4000 BCE, they built cities with organized governments, standardized weights, and written language. Yet beneath their earliest levels, archaeologists find evidence of irrigation canals, pottery styles, and metallurgical techniques that seem to predate their supposed origins. When the Sumerians themselves wrote about their beginnings, they attributed everything to the gods, the Anunnaki, who, according to their myths, descended from the sky to teach them law, agriculture, and architecture. To modern readers, these are symbols, but to the Sumerians, they were history. Historians are still debating whether these myths describe divine revelation, cultural memory, or metaphor. Some scholars interpret the Anunnaki as early kings, deified by their descendants. Others see them as allegories for natural forces. Yet what makes the Sumerian texts remarkable is their consistency with other ancient stories. Egypt's Zep-Tepi, Mesoamerica's first sun, India's Satya Yuga, all describe a golden age when knowledge descended from above, followed by flood, fire, and forgetfulness. The recurrence of this theme across distant lands suggests not coincidence, but inheritance. The Egyptians claim their civilization began not with the pharaohs, but with the Shemsu-Hor, the followers of Horus, who ruled for thousands of years before the first recorded dynasty. Similarly, in India, the ancient texts known as the Puranas describe a lineage of kings stretching back hundreds of millennia, far beyond what conventional archaeology allows. In the Andes, the Inca spoke of Viracocha, a bearded teacher who emerged from the sea after a great flood, teaching agriculture and measurement before vanishing across the ocean. These founders are always described the same way: tall, pale, bearded, and luminous. Whether symbolic or not, the repetition is uncanny. At the heart of these myths lies a single question: how did humanity leap from scattered hunter-gatherers to city builders so quickly? The timeline of agriculture and metallurgy suggests a progression spanning thousands of years, yet the archaeological record often compresses it into mere centuries. The suddenness of these transitions, the Sumerian jump, the Egyptian explosion, hints that knowledge may have been transmitted, not invented. If so, then the ruins we call ancient might actually be memorials to something even older, preserved through oral tradition after catastrophe. Modern discoveries continue to complicate the narrative. At sites like Jericho and Çatalhöyük, cities appear thousands of years before writing, with complex trade networks and proto-temples. Göbekli Tepe, built around 9600 BCE, stands at the dawn of agriculture, yet displays architectural mastery, carved pillars, astronomical alignments, and symbolic art. Its builders were supposed to be nomads, but they organized labor, design, and spiritual purpose on a monumental scale. Then, inexplicably, they buried it. Such behavior suggests not a beginning, but a deliberate preservation, as if they were safeguarding memory through ritual burial, ensuring it would be rediscovered by future generations. Historians are still debating why early civilizations exhibit such uniform myths of instruction. Could they all have stemmed from shared prehistoric origins? Linguistic studies hint at ancient connections between distant peoples. The proto-languages of Eurasia share roots with words found in the Americas and Oceania, suggesting contact long before recorded history. DNA evidence also reveals unexpected migrations, genetic links between Siberian and Native American populations, between early Iranians and the Indus Valley, even between Mediterranean and South American lineages. The world was more connected than we once thought, perhaps by survivors rebuilding after an event that fractured the old world. Some theorists propose that these survivors were seafarers, remnants of an Ice Age civilization displaced by rising seas. As glaciers melted, coastlines vanished, and the global population was forced inland. Maritime cultures, reliant on observation of the stars and tides, would have preserved navigational and architectural knowledge. When they resettled in new lands, they became the culture heroes of myth, the gods who brought light to darkness. If this theory holds, then the sudden rise of civilizations around 10,000 to 4,000 BCE may represent the re-emergence of a single global legacy. The pattern extends even to mathematics and measurement. The Sumerian base 60 system, the Egyptian royal cubit, the Mayan calendar, and the Indus Valley's standardized brick ratios all reflect geometric constants derived from astronomy, especially the movement of Earth around the Sun and the precession of the equinoxes. These systems appear independently, yet share identical proportions. Such precision suggests not random development, but an inherited tradition of cosmic mathematics, a science too complex to emerge spontaneously in multiple places at once. Historians are still debating how such uniformity arose. One school attributes it to convergent evolution, different societies reaching the same conclusions through observation. Another, more controversial, suggests a single point of origin, a mother civilization, destroyed long before written history, whose knowledge survived in fragments carried by wanderers. Plato's tale of Atlantis, once dismissed as allegory, begins to sound like collective memory, a story retold in pieces by its inheritors, adapted to new landscapes and languages. If this interpretation is true, then the first written civilizations were not innovators, but archivists, reconstructing, imperfectly, what their ancestors already knew. The monumental architecture of Egypt and Mesopotamia may have been less about progress and more about remembrance. The Sumerian ziggurat, shaped like a stepped mountain, and the Egyptian pyramid, angled toward the sky, could both represent attempts to mirror a forgotten ideal, an ancient geometry of sacred proportion meant to reconnect heaven and earth. Archaeological anomalies support this hypothesis. Tools and construction methods remain elusive for the earliest phases of these civilizations. The Great Pyramid's builders left no detailed records of technique. The Sumerians wrote of metallurgy and complex irrigation, yet their early strata lack the experimental debris expected from invention. Everything appears refined from the start, as though perfected knowledge had been introduced rather than developed. The debate remains unresolved, but the implications are profound. If human civilization is cyclical, if knowledge rises, falls, and rises again, then history as we know it represents only one chapter in a much older story. Our ancestors may have been inheritors of a lineage that stretches back tens of thousands of years, each cycle preserving fragments of the one before. The myths of gods, floods, and rebirths would then be echoes of memory, carried through language and ritual long after the facts were lost. Perhaps that is why the ancients built in stone. They understood that words perish, paper burns, and dynasties crumble, but stone endures. Each monument was a message to the future, to us, saying, "We remembered what came before." We may not yet know the name of the civilization that first mastered the stars or mapped the earth, but its fingerprints remain in every sacred alignment, every myth of descent from heaven, every sudden leap of knowledge that history cannot explain. And if humanity itself is the continuation of that legacy, then our modern age, with all its technology and blindness, may not be the first to reach for the heavens, only the latest to do so. The ruins beneath our feet are not just the past, they are warnings. They remind us that greatness can return, but also that it can vanish, leaving only whispers in clay and stone, waiting for the next world to begin again. The sea holds more secrets than the land ever could. It is where continents drowned, where rivers became trenches, and where cities, if the legends are true, sleep beneath miles of silence. For centuries, sailors and scholars alike have spoken of ruins glimpsed beneath the waves, of walls and roads visible in fleeting moments when the tide retreats. These stories were dismissed as myth, until modern sonar and satellite mapping began revealing shapes that seemed too geometric, too deliberate, to belong entirely to nature. Across the ocean floor lie strange patterns of symmetry, terraces, blocks, and grid-like structures now hidden beneath sediment and coral. They may be natural, but they also may not be. In the early 2000s, oceanographers mapping the seabed near Cuba's Guanacabi's Peninsula detected massive rectangular formations nearly 2,000 feet below the surface. The sonar images showed stone-like structures arranged in grids, pyramidal forms, and corridors stretching over several square kilometers. The discovery stirred immediate excitement. Had they found Atlantis? Divers and submersibles sent to the site reported blocks of limestone-like material that seemed to form walls and steps. Yet as quickly as the discovery surfaced, it was buried again in bureaucratic silence. The Cuban government restricted access, funding evaporated, and the mainstream scientific community moved on. Officially, the structures are unexplained geological formations. Unofficially, they remain one of the ocean's great enigmas. Historians are still debating whether such underwater anomalies could represent the remains of pre-Ice Age settlements. The problem is depth. At 2,000 feet, sea levels would have needed to rise catastrophically to submerge such structures, far more than the 400 feet attributed to glacial melt. That depth suggests tectonic movement or continental collapse, events not recorded in the recent geological timeline. Yet some researchers point to regions of rapid crustal subsidence, places where earthquakes and volcanic activity could have dragged entire coastal plains underwater. If that were the case, then the lost cities might not be mythic at all, but casualties of the planet's restless geology. Other underwater sites echo the same mystery. Off Japan's Yonaguni Island lies a submerged complex of terraces, steps, and platforms discovered in 1986 by diver Kihachiro Aratarki. At first glance, it appears artificial: 90-degree angles, smooth walls, and even what looks like a stairway leading to a rectangular plaza. Marine geologist Masaki Kimura argued that the site was once a city, built over 10,000 years ago, when sea levels were far lower. His critics insist it's a natural formation, sandstone eroded by ocean currents. Yet the presence of carved symbols, tool marks, and separate megaliths nearby complicates that conclusion. Whether natural or human-made, Yonaguni stands as a haunting threshold between geology and archaeology. The Indian Ocean, too, conceals traces of what may once have been civilization. In the Gulf of Combat, sonar surveys have revealed extensive submerged structures, grids of streets, foundations, and artifacts carbon-dated to nearly 9,500 years old. Among the findings were tools, pottery shards, and human bones, far older than the Indus Valley civilization. If confirmed, this would rewrite the history of urban development in South Asia. Yet skepticism persists, as strong currents and sediment make verification nearly impossible. Still, the region's legends of the drowned city of Dwarka, home of the god Krishna, take on eerie new resonance in light of these discoveries. Elsewhere, in the Mediterranean, ruins lie beneath the waves near Sicily, Malta, and the coast of Israel. At Atlit Yam, an underwater site off Haifa, archaeologists uncovered stone circles, houses, and human remains dating back 9,000 years, preserved beneath rising seas. These were not myths but real villages, frozen in time. Such finds prove that entire settlements did indeed vanish as the Ice Age ended, swallowed by the advancing ocean. And if small villages could vanish, could not cities as well? The difference, perhaps, is only a matter of scale. Historians are still debating the implications of these submerged sites. The pattern they form is global, coastal ruins lying at depths corresponding to sea level rise since the last glacial maximum. That distribution aligns with the flood myths of countless cultures, from the Sumerian deluge to Noah's Ark to the legends of Mu and Lemuria. If rising seas erased entire societies, those survivors would have fled inland, carrying their knowledge with them. The rebirth of civilization around 10,000 BCE, the rise of agriculture, the sudden flowering of architecture, could represent the efforts of these displaced peoples to rebuild. Geologists studying ancient shorelines have confirmed that the transition from Ice Age to modern climate was neither gradual nor gentle. Sea levels rose in violent surges, known as meltwater pulses, when vast ice sheets collapsed. These events could raise global waters by tens of feet within a century. For coastal peoples, it would have seemed as though the sea itself had turned against them. Villages would vanish overnight, and memories of safety would transform into myths of divine punishment. The flood, in this sense, was both historical and psychological. Modern mapping continues to reveal the scars of this cataclysm. Submerged river valleys, now drowned continental shelves, outline coastlines that once extended hundreds of miles further out. Along these ghost shores lie anomalies, linear ridges, circular mounds, and symmetrical terraces, shapes unlikely to form by chance. The continental shelves of Southeast Asia, known collectively as Sunderland, were once fertile plains connecting modern Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand. When the seas rose, they were inundated, leaving only island fragments behind. Genetic studies show that early human populations spread outward from this region just after the floods, carrying both their genes and their stories of a lost homeland. The same pattern appears in the Atlantic, along the coasts of Spain, Portugal, and the Azores. Underwater surveys have located geometric formations resembling roads or walls. Near the Canary Islands, divers have reported pyramidal structures built from basalt blocks. Mainstream geology explains them as natural formations, but to many, they evoke the enduring myth of Atlantis. Plato's account placed the island empire beyond the Pillars of Heracles, a phrase long associated with the Strait of Gibraltar. Whether coincidence or connection, the distribution of these submerged sites mirrors his description, a ring of cultures surrounding the Atlantic, each remembering a flood that destroyed the old world. Historians are still debating how to interpret these convergences. The conservative view holds that humanity's coastal settlements simply succumbed to post-glacial flooding. The more speculative perspective suggests that what was lost might have been more than villages, that the oceans may conceal an entire chapter of civilization, erased by nature but preserved beneath sediment. With each new sonar sweep, the possibility grows harder to ignore. If one day those ruins are proven to be man-made, it will force a profound reevaluation of history. Our understanding of human progress, from primitive tribes to technological societies, would need rewriting. Civilization would no longer be a miracle of recent millennia, but a cyclical phenomenon, older than the ice, perhaps as old as humanity itself. The ocean is an archivist of Eurasia. It buries the past in silence, preserving its shapes but not its names. The coral grows, the sand drifts, the tectonic plates shift, and the story disappears. Yet beneath every wave, beneath every submerged terrace and forgotten coast, lies the possibility of revelation. The next discovery, the next sonar ping or diver's light, may unveil proof that the sea did not merely destroy. It kept the world's first memories safe. For now, we can only wonder. The continents we know may be the survivors of others that fell. The shorelines of today may hide the capitals of yesterday. Humanity builds upon the ruins of itself, layer upon layer, unaware that beneath the calm surface of the modern sea, entire civilizations may dream in the dark, their temples intact, their streets silent, their story unfinished, waiting for the tide to turn once more. Beneath every myth, every ruin, and every grain of buried sand runs a quiet thread, the suggestion that civilization is not a straight line but a circle. Each epoch rises, flourishes, and falls, only for another to rise again upon its bones. This idea, once confined to the margins of speculation, now echoes in the corridors of science, archaeology, and philosophy alike. The story of humanity may not be a tale of progress but of remembering, a long, recurring awakening after long sleeps. And if the clues scattered across the earth and under its seas mean anything, then perhaps we're not the first to stand where we stand now, gazing at the stars, convinced we are the beginning. Historians are still debating how far back the roots of civilization extend. The archaeological record suggests that something extraordinary happened around 12,000 years ago, a threshold moment when the ice retreated, rivers swelled, and humanity began to build. Yet, scattered evidence points to prior sophistication. Ancient maps that show ice-free continents, myths of lost continents, inexplicable monuments whose builders remain unknown. These fragments resist tidy explanation. They suggest that the human story may be older, stranger, and more cyclical than the modern mind is comfortable admitting. In the traditional view, history progresses upward, from stone to bronze to iron to silicon. Each stage, more advanced than the last. But the planet itself tells another story, one of periodic collapse. Volcanoes blot out the sun, comets strike the oceans, magnetic poles shift, species rise and vanish. Each time, the slate is wiped nearly clean, leaving only the faintest impressions of what came before. And then life begins again, inventing, forgetting, remembering. The pattern repeats so reliably that some scientists now describe it not as anomaly, but as rhythm, a pulse of the Earth itself. If this is true, then perhaps lost civilizations are not exceptions, but inevitabilities, chapters in the same planetary cycle. Each one builds until it overreaches, until nature reclaims its domain. Whether through ice, fire, or water, the Earth resets the balance. It does not destroy out of malice, but out of law. And from those who survive come the myths, stories of gods and floods and golden ages, retold in every tongue, across every shore. Modern science, in its way, has begun to confirm what the ancients always suspected, that destruction and creation are intertwined. Geological cores reveal sudden transitions, layers of ash melt glass, and soot marking moments when worlds ended. At each boundary lies both extinction and renewal. After the dinosaurs came the mammals, after the Ice Age came humanity. What, then, might come after us? Or perhaps, what might have come before? One of the most haunting questions in archaeology is not what was lost, but what will be found. Imagine, millions of years from now, some future species, perhaps human, perhaps not, uncovering traces of our age. What would they find? A thin band of plastic embedded in rock, a spike of carbon in the atmosphere, faint radio echoes fading into the cosmic background. Would they see us as gods or ghosts? Would they invent their own myths about the people who rose from the dust, built towers of glass, and vanished into fire? The irony is that we might already be living amid the ruins of those who came before, unaware. The stones beneath modern cities may once have been altars, the bedrock of our knowledge. Mathematics, geometry, astronomy could be inherited, carried through floods and migrations by survivors who themselves were heirs to an older world. Every time we rediscover a constant or principle, we may simply be remembering. In this view, science itself becomes an act of recollection, the cosmos teaching us what it has already taught before. Historians are still debating how myth, science, and deep time might intertwine. Some believe that the stories of ancient gods descending from the heavens or rising from the sea are symbolic retellings of cosmic or geological events. Comets seen as serpents, floods as divine punishment. Others suggest a subtler truth, that myths encode memory in poetic form, preserving knowledge that reason alone cannot hold. In that sense, myth is not primitive superstition, but the oldest form of data storage, a way for the human mind to transmit warning and wonder across extinction itself. Consider the parallels between the ancients' visions of renewal and our own modern anxieties. Where they spoke of deluge, we speak of climate change. Where they warned of fire from the sky, we fear asteroids or nuclear war. Their gods demanded humility. Our equations predict consequence. The language changes, but the meaning does not. Civilization, for all its brilliance, walks a narrow edge between enlightenment and oblivion. And yet, there's something comforting in the cycle. If the world has ended before, and life returned each time, then perhaps destruction is not an end but a metamorphosis. The ruins we build today may inspire the myths of the next civilization, 1,000 generations hence, when humanity, or whatever comes after, begins again. They will tell stories of glowing towers, flying chariots, and invisible networks that carried thought through the air. They will wonder who we were, what we believed, and how we lost so much. They will build their temples upon the ruins of our cities and call them sacred, as we once did with the stones of those before us. What, then, remains of meaning when everything is temporary? Perhaps it lies not in permanence, but in continuity. The fact that stories, ideas, and curiosity survive collapse suggests that something within life itself resists erasure. The impulse to understand, to map the stars, to build monuments, to seek truth, reappears every time consciousness reawakens. It is as though the universe itself longs to remember through us. If the evidence scattered across Earth's crust and seabeds is any indication, humanity's age of memory is only the latest in a long succession. The Antikythera mechanism, the pyramids, the megaliths, the myths, all fragments of an ancient conversation continuing through time. Whether our predecessors were human or something else scarcely matters. What matters is that they, too, looked up at the sky and wondered if they were alone. And so the circle closes. The first builders, whoever they were, vanished beneath flood and stone. Their memory became legend. The legends became myth. The myths inspired the next builders, who carried forward fragments of the same dream, to endure, to know, to transcend time. We, too, are builders of that same lineage, temporary participants in an eternal dialogue between knowledge and forgetting. Someday, the earth will erase us, the oceans will rise, the forests will reclaim our cities, and the stars we use for navigation will drift beyond recognition. But the cycle will continue, as it always has. Somewhere, far in the future, another civilization will walk among our fossils and wonder, as we do now, whether they are truly the first, or merely the next. And perhaps, when that moment comes, they will find the same conclusion written beneath every ruin and every myth we have inherited: that knowledge is fragile, time is cyclical, and civilization, for all its brilliance, is only a breath between eternities. The story ends not with revelation, but with quiet. The fires of discovery fade, the machinery of history slows, and the earth returns to stillness. What remains is not certainty, but wonder, the sense that we are part of something vast and ancient, repeating in forms we can scarcely grasp. The ruins of the past, the myths of forgotten gods, the silent stones beneath the sea, they are not warnings so much as invitations. They ask us to remember, to listen, to imagine what might have been and what may come again. Perhaps that is all civilization ever is, a heartbeat between catastrophes, a flicker of light before the dark. But within that flicker lies beauty, the architecture, the art, the maps, the stars, the enduring desire to know. It is not the permanence of our works that matters, but their echo. Like a melody played across centuries, the memory of who we were may continue long after our names fade. If there truly were others before us, if their knowledge became our instinct, their voices our myths, then we are not alone in the cosmos of time. We are continuations of an unbroken dream, reborn after each forgetting, carrying forward the same spark that first lit consciousness itself. So tonight, as the world turns quietly beneath its endless sky, remember that the stars above have watched it all, every rise, every fall, every resurrection. They ask for nothing, yet record everything. And in their patient silence lies the truth, that no civilization is ever truly lost. only sleeping, waiting for another dawn. Good night.